The first time I found a face under the ice, it was looking straight up at me like it had been waiting for my shadow. Black ice can be so clear, it doesn't feel real. It turns a lake into a sheet of smoked glass, and when you're standing on it, you can see down into that cold green-black space, the way you can see into a store window at night, until you notice the thing staring back. I was halfway across Pine Hollow Lake when the sun slipped behind a cloud and the surface went from sparkling to mirror dark. I stopped because the silence changed. No wind, no skates scraping. Even my friends behind me went quiet, like our bodies understood something before our brains did. I looked down, expecting to see weeds or a lost lure. Instead, I saw skin. Not pale from snow-light skin with color in it, a sick, bruised gray that belonged to something warm, trapped in something cold. At first, it was just an oval shape. Then my eyes focused, and the oval became a forehead, and the forehead became eyebrows. And then I saw the whites of eyes, wide and wet-looking beneath the ice, as if the lake itself had tears. The face was maybe a foot below the surface, perfectly framed by a spiderweb of white cracks. A woman, I thought. Or a teenager. It was hard to tell because the mouth was open in a silent O, and a cluster of tiny bubbles sat frozen around the lips like beads. I told myself it had to be old. A body that had surfaced and refrozen. That was the only sane explanation. But then the eyes moved. Not a blink movement, tracking. The pupils slid up toward me, slow and deliberate, until they were centered. And I understood with a clean, nauseating certainty that whatever was under the ice could see me. My legs tried to run. My feet wouldn't. You don't sprint on ice. You shuffle and pray. I dropped to my knees without meaning to. Palms splayed, and that's when the ice answered. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't above me. It wasn't from my friends. The tapping came from below, a dull pressure sound that traveled through the slab into my bones. The face's mouth stretched wider, not screaming, but smiling like it had found the right door. I yanked my hands back, as if the ice could bite. My gloves left faint, wet prints on the surface, and under each print from beneath a second print appeared. 5 long fingers, pressing up, matching mine, as if something down there was copying me through a pane of glass. I slid backward on my butt, ridiculous and terrified, and I heard my friend Nate shout my name from far away. I tried to shout back, but my voice came out thin, stolen by the cold. I pointed down. Nate skated closer. The moment his shadow crossed the spot, the face turned toward him. Not toward the light, toward the shadow, toward the living. Nate stopped so hard his blades scraped. He stared, and I watched his expression go from confusion to disbelief, to the kind of fear that makes you look older in 1 second. He whispered, "That's not." And then the ice cracked. Not a little crack, like a warning. A sharp branching sound like a rifle, shot racing outward in bright white lines. The face didn't flinch. The face didn't sink. The face rose, just an inch, just enough that the features sharpened enough that I could see frost on eyelashes, and a thin line of blood at the nostril that hadn't frozen yet. Alive. I scrambled, and Nate grabbed my coat and hauled me up. We skated back the way we came. Not fast, not safely, just away. Every few feet behind us came another crack, 2 perfectly timed to be natural-like footsteps following from underneath. We reached the shore and fell onto snow, gasping, and I looked back, expecting to see a hole, a body, anything. The lake looked smooth and innocent. Then from the center of the black glass, a single handprint bloomed, white beneath the surface. Fingers spread, pressing up, and it slid an inch. Then another, as if whatever was down there had started to crawl toward us under the ice. I don't know how long we stood there, frozen for reasons that had nothing to do with winter, but I do remember the last thing I saw before we ran for the parking lot. The handprint stopped, the fingers curled, and in the clear dark water below the ice, the face tilted like someone cocking their head to listen, and I swear it smiled with its eyes. On the drive home, the heater blasting my hands kept itching like they'd been burned, and every time I blinked I saw that mouth opening wider under the ice. We called 911, because that's what you do when you think you've found a person trapped in a lake. The dispatcher asked for landmarks and I kept repeating. It was right there. It was right under our feet, as if the lake could hear me through the phone. Within 20 minutes, a county truck rolled in, with 2 deputies and a volunteer firefighter in a float suit. They brought an auger ropes, a rescue board, the kind of gear that turns panic into procedure. Watching them made me feel stupid for a second. Like maybe we'd spooked ourselves with shadows and cracks and cold. Then the firefighter stepped onto the ice with the calm confidence of someone who has done this before, and the ice made no sound at all. Not a groan, not a creak. It was too quiet, as if it was holding its breath. We walked them to the spot. I could have found it with my eyes closed. I'd memorized the exact angle of the shoreline, the cluster of cattails, the way the cracks had formed like a frame. But when we got there, the ice was perfect. No cracks, no bubbles, no face. Just black, clean glass, with our reflections warped inside it. Nate started babbling, trying to explain. The deputy looked at us like we were teenagers who'd been drinking. I felt my cheeks burn with shame and fear, because if there had been a person under there and we'd wasted time. The firefighter knelt and scraped the surface with his glove. "Clear ice," he said, almost impressed. Then he leaned down and pressed his ear to it. He stayed like that for a long moment. His breath fogged and froze in a thin crescent on the lake. When he sat back up, his face had changed. "I heard something," he said, quiet. "Could be shifting." "Could be." "Something else." The deputy told him to drill. The auger's blades bit into the ice with a crunchy scream, and every rotation sent vibrations through the slab that made my stomach flip. I watched the hole widen, watched dark water appear like an eye-opening. The firefighter cleared slush and dropped a flashlight down on a cord. The beam cut through the water and lit up a pale cloud of suspended ice crystals. For 3 seconds, it was just water. Then the light caught something round and smooth, moving at the edge of the beam, and my brain insisted it was a fish until it turned and I saw it was a forehead. The face was back, but it was farther down now, hovering in the water like it wasn't buoyant. The eyes were open, fixed on the circle of light above. Fixed on us? The firefighter whispered Jesus like a prayer and a warning at the same time. The deputy leaned over the hole, his gloved hand on the rope, and said, "Ma'am, can you hear me?" From below, the tapping started again. Not on the ice this time. On the edge of the hole. Tap. 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 The sound was sharper because the ice around the opening was thinner. Each tap made little chips jump and skitter away. The deputy jerked back. "Something's in there," he said, and I wanted to scream. Because no, someone's in there, you idiot, someone. Then a hand rose into the beam. It wasn't waving. It wasn't reaching for help. It pressed 2 fingers against the underside of the ice near the hole, testing it patient and deliberate. The way you test a door you've locked to see if it's still locked. The firefighter tightened his grip on the rope and told the deputy to step back. He clipped himself in, slid flat onto the rescue board, and inched toward the opening. I watched him move with the careful precision of someone crawling across thin ice, and I realized with a sudden clarity that the ice didn't feel thin anymore. It felt soft. The firefighter put his gloved hand on the rim to steady himself. The moment his palm touched the edge, the water surged upward as if the lake had inhaled. The flashlight swung wildly, and in that strobing beam I saw the face shoot up fast, so fast it blurred until it filled the hole from below. It wasn't smiling now. It was hungry. The firefighter yanked his hand back, but something caught the cuff of his glove from underneath. Not like a grab, more like a hook. He shouted and flailed, and for a split second the surface around the hole spiderwebbed, with fresh cracks radiating out in perfect circles like ripples made of glass. The deputy hauled on the rope, dragging him away, and the firefighter's glove came off, in the struggle left behind like an offering. It didn't float. It didn't sink. It stuck to the underside of the ice, flattened there, as if pressed from below by an invisible palm. Everyone backed up. Nobody said the word rescue anymore. The deputy called for more units for dive team, for state police, his voice shaking despite all his training. And then the ice began to crack in a line straight toward the shore. Not random, not spreading, but advancing. One sharp pop after another, like a thing beneath it was walking directly at us, using the fractures as footsteps. We ran. Behind us, over the sound of boots on snow and a radio squawking, I heard one last tap from the hole, slow and satisfied, like a knuckle on a door that knows you're home. By the time more trucks arrived, the hole had filmed over with slush, like the lake was trying to erase evidence. They marked the GPS, put up tape, and told everyone to get off the ice. A dive team was supposed to come at first light, but overnight, the temperature dropped, and the entire surface snapped into a new, flawless sheet. In the morning, they drilled again. The hole was there, but the water beneath it was empty, dark and still. No face, no glove, nothing caught in the light except drifting ice crystals. A week later, the sheriff called my mum to tell her someone had taken down the warning tape and gone out anyway. They found a single boot print trail leading from the shoreline toward the center of the lake, but the trail ended in the middle of perfect ice, as if the person had been lifted straight up and carried away without leaving a second step. The sheriff asked if we'd heard rumors, if the lake had a history, if anyone had been missing. I said no. I didn't tell him what I'd been dreaming because it sounded insane even to me. Every night I dreamed I was standing on glass, and under it I could see a room, not water. A room full of faces stacked, like mannequins in a department store window, all of them watching up. In the dream, the tapping came from everywhere at once, and when I looked down, my own hands were pressed to the ice from below, as if I was the one trapped and someone else was walking on top of me. I'd wake up with my palms aching and damp, like I'd been sweating through gloves. In March, when the thaw finally started, the local news ran a short segment about Pine Hollow opening early for fishing because the ice had been unusually stable. I watched that report in my living room and felt sick, because stability is not the word I'd use for a lake that can hide and erase a person. A few days after that, a stranger account messaged me online. No profile picture, no name that meant anything, just a single file attachment. It was a photo taken from under clear ice. I recognized the pattern of cracks immediately. My mind had memorized them the way it memorizes a disaster. The camera angle was looking up, through black glass at a distorted sky, and in the center of the frame was my face, stretched and terrified, my mouth open, exactly like the face I'd seen. Under the photo, the account wrote one sentence: "I found you too." I blocked the account. I deleted the message. I told myself it was a sick prank. But that night, while I was brushing my teeth, the bathroom light flickered once, and in the mirror behind my shoulder, I saw a faint white handprint bloom on the glass. 5 long fingers, as if someone had pressed from the other side and left the cold behind. I didn't turn around. I just stood there, staring at my own reflection, listening, waiting for the first soft tap that would tell me the lake had followed me home. I found out what it means to be alone on a frozen lake at 3 a.m. when something started knocking from the other side of the ice. Not on my tent, not on the wind-battered fabric. From below, through 10 inches of clear blue-black ice, through the water, through the hole I'd drilled with my own hands. I was ice fishing on a small lake outside town, the kind of place locals love because it's quiet and safe. The kind of place where the surface is so flat, you feel like you're sitting on a dinner plate in the middle of nowhere. My headlamp was the only light, for a quarter mile, a little cone of yellow in a world made of snow and darkness. I'd set up a pop-up shelter, a folding chair, a small heater, and a 5-gallon bucket for my gear. The hole was right between my boots, a perfectly round opening with water so black it looked like ink. I dropped my line, listened to the faint hum of the heater, and tried not to think about the depth under me. The first knock came at 2:57 a.m., right when the lake was at its quietest. It was a soft, deliberate tap that vibrated up the rod and into my fingers. I froze, thinking maybe a fish had bumped the bait. Then came a second tap. Then a third, even spacing. Too rhythmic to be random. Tap, 2. Tap, tap. I lifted the line, checked the hook, and lowered it again. The tapping stopped. For maybe 30 seconds, I convinced myself I'd imagined it. I remember actually laughing, once alone in my shelter, because when you're cold and bored, your brain makes monsters out of normal sounds. Then the bucket beside me answered. Tap, tap, tap. The sound came from the bottom of the plastic, like someone was tapping on it with a fingernail from underneath. I stared at it, confused, because the bucket was on the ice, and there was nothing beneath it but the lake. I leaned over and put my palm on the bucket. It vibrated. One clean tap felt more than heard. I pulled my hand back, and my skin prickled with goosebumps that had nothing to do with the temperature. I unzipped the tent flap an inch and looked out. The moonlight made the lake look like a frozen parking lot, endless and empty. No lanterns, no other shelters, just my tracks leading from the shore to my spot. The closest tree line was a black smear. My truck sat there half buried in snow, so far away it looked like a toy. When I zipped the flap shut, the tapping resumed, but now it came from the rim of the hole. Tap, 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 not like a fish, like knuckles on a door. I held my breath and listened. The taps moved around the circle, traveling clockwise, as if something below was walking its fingers along the edge, testing where the ice was weakest. The heater clicked, and the sudden sound made me flinch so hard I almost knocked my chair over. I told myself to leave. That's the smart thing. But there's a stubborn part of you when you fish, especially when you're trying to prove you can handle winter, that wants an explanation. So I grabbed my underwater camera, the cheap kind on a cord, and lowered it into the hole, watching the little screen on the handset light up with grainy green. The camera sank past the ice lip and the world changed. Ice looks solid from above, but from below it's a ceiling, dimpled and cloudy, and my hole was a bright circle of moonlight. Snowflakes drifted down in slow motion. My line dangled in the frame like a spider thread. And then on the edge of the screen a hand appeared. Not a paw, not a fin. A human hand, pale and swollen looking in the cold water, fingers long and wrong. It didn't grab. It didn't wave. It tapped. One finger touched the underside of the ice, directly beneath my bucket's position, and the camera picked up the vibration as a tiny shudder. Tap, tap, tap. My throat went dry. I yanked the camera up so fast the cord burned my glove. The screen flashed white as the camera hit the ice lip. I dropped it onto the slush and stared at it like it might bite. That's when the heater went out. The little orange glow died and my shelter fell into a thicker darkness. Without the hum, the lake's silence became a physical pressure. I could hear my own heart. I could hear my breath. And under it, very faint, I could hear something else scraping, like skin dragging along the underside of the ice. The bucket tapped again. Slower now. More confident. Tap, tap, tap. Then the tapping shifted to the metal legs of my chair, a delicate pinging, like someone flicking them from below one at a time, finding the exact points that carried sound. I stood up so fast, my chair toppled. The whole water rippled without wind. I saw a shadow pass beneath the circle of moonlight, not deep, not like a fish, but right under the ice, sliding. Then the taps stopped entirely. In the sudden silence, a voice spoke from outside the tent, muffled by fabric and snow. You got a bite. I felt my blood turn to ice because there shouldn't have been anyone out there. I didn't answer. The voice repeated a little closer. You got a bite, and the tone was wrong. Too flat. Like someone repeating a line they didn't understand. I reached for my phone, and the screen showed no signal. Of course, it did. The lake was a dead zone. My truck keys were in my jacket pocket, but the thought of unzipping the flap and stepping onto that open ice made my stomach roll. Something tapped the inside of the tent wall at shoulder height. Once, twice. It wasn't the wind. It was measured, polite, like a person knocking, waiting to be invited in. Then the tapping came from below again, louder, right beneath my boots, and I realized with a sick certainty that there was more than one thing out there, something on the surface and something under it, coordinating. I backed up until my shoulders hit the tent frame. The floor of the shelter was just ice, covered in a thin mat. I could feel every vibration through it. Tap, 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 a pause. Then 3 taps again, like a pattern, like a code. I don't know why I did this, but I raised my gloved knuckles and tapped back on the ice. 3 quick knocks. The moment I did, the response came instantly from below, perfectly matching my rhythm, perfectly matching my strength, like the ice had become a membrane and something on the other side was pressing its knuckles to mine. Another voice lower, closer, whispered from outside. "Open up." I didn't move. I couldn't. My mind went blank in the way it does when a predator finally shows itself. The zipper on the tent flap twitched once, just a centimeter, like someone had pinched it. Then it twitched again. The flap wasn't being pulled by wind. It was being worked patiently with cold fingers. I grabbed the ice skimmer like it was a weapon. Ridiculous. A perforated spoon against whatever was outside. I swung my headlamp beam toward the flap and saw a dark shape press close to the fabric. Close enough that I could make out the indentation of a face-nosed brow, the suggestion of a mouth. The material was thin and wet in one spot, as if the person outside had been breathing onto it for a long time. The tapping from below stopped. That was worse than the tapping. Silence meant whatever was under the ice had reached the hole. I stared at that ink-dark circle and had the stupidest thought in the world. Maybe it's just a fish playing with me. Then something brushed the underside of the ice with a sound like a palm sliding on glass, and the bucket beside me shivered once, not from wind, but from pressure. I could feel it searching patient like it had all night. The water in the hole bulged upward, as if the lake was pushing a bubble through. A pale finger broke the surface, not bursting through like something drowning, but rising slowly, controlled. It hooked over the rim of the ice circle and held there, gripping. Then a second finger appeared beside it. Then a third. A hand was climbing out of the lake through my fishing hole. I backed away until my boots hit the fallen chair. The hand flexed water streaming off it, and I saw the nails too clean, too long, like someone had filed them into points. The skin wasn't wrinkled the way it should be, after being in cold water. It looked tight, fresh, almost waxy. Outside, the voice said calm and close. "You already invited us." I didn't understand, and then I remembered my stupid knock on the ice. 3 taps. A reply. An answer to a door I didn't know existed. The hand in the hole tapped once on the ice rim, as if acknowledging that memory. Then it tapped twice more, finishing the pattern. Tap, tap, tap. The zipper moved again. This time it slid down a full inch smooth, like someone who had done it 100 times. The flap parted enough for a slice of night to show through. Cold air rushed in. My headlamp beam cut the opening, and in that narrow gap I saw an eye. Not a reflection. An eye, looking in, unblinking, as if the dark itself had a pupil. I screamed. It came out hoarse and ugly, the sound of someone whose body is pleading with their brain to survive. I lunged forward and grabbed the zipper pull, yanking it up with all my strength. The fabric snagged for a second, and in that second, something from outside pushed hard. The tent wall bowed inward, and the frame creaked. Under my feet the ice answered, with a crack so sharp it felt like a gunshot. The shelter trembled. The whole water surged. The hand retreated, then slapped flat against the underside of the ice, palm up, fingers spread, as if it had decided it didn't need the hole anymore. A second hand pressed up beside it. Then a third, smaller one. The ice floor under the shelter became a display case of palms, pushing, testing, trying to find a seam. And then, from the lake beneath my boots, I felt something push back against my own weight, lifting slightly, as if the ice was no longer holding me from above, but holding me from below. Like I was standing on a lid that something was trying to open. I don't remember deciding to run. My body made the decision for me. I kicked my fallen chair aside, grabbed my keys and phone, and threw myself at the tent flap, yanking the zipper so hard it jammed. The fabric resisted, like it didn't want to open anymore, like it wanted to keep me inside for whatever was waiting. I ripped the Velcro, forced a gap, and spilled out onto the open lake. Night air hit my face like a slap. My headlamp beam swept across the ice, and for a second I saw something standing on the surface, 20 feet away. Still too upright to be a tree, too close to be a shadow. Then the beam slid, and there was nothing there, just my own breath, fogging, and the flat glittering expanse. Behind me the tent shuddered once, as if something heavy had leaned into it, and I heard the smallest sound of all the zipper pull clicking down one notch by itself. I ran anyway. Every step, felt like a gamble. The ice under my boots popped and sang, and I kept waiting for the surface to drop out from under me, for that black water to open like a mouth. I didn't look back until I reached the shore, and the ground turned to crunchy snow. From the bank I shined my light back toward my shelter. The tent was still there, but the floor beneath it was glowing faintly, not with light, but with a thin lace of cracks, spreading outward in a perfect circle like a target. It looked as if something under the ice had finally found the center point. I got to my truck and fumbled the keys, so badly I dropped them twice. When the engine finally caught, the radio came on by itself, hissing with static, and in that static, I heard 3 taps clear as a knuckle on plastic right against the inside of my door panel. Tap, tap, tap. I drove home without stopping. I didn't call anyone until I was in my driveway with the porch light on, because I needed to see something normal to convince my brain this was real. When I finally called my buddy who'd taken me to that lake before, he didn't laugh. He went quiet and asked, "Did you tap back? Apparently there's an old superstition among the ice fishing guys around here. If you hear knocking from below, you never answer it. Not with your voice. Not with your hands. Because the lake is a door, and anything patient enough to knock in the middle of the night is patient enough to wait for you to invite it. I haven't been back out on the ice since. But last week I opened my freezer to grab a bag of peas, and my ice maker dropped a fresh batch into the bin 3 sharp clacks in a row. Tap, tap, tap. I stood there, with the door open, staring at the cube tray, and I saw one cube that wasn't a cube at all. It was a perfect little disc of clear ice, with a tiny fingerprint trapped inside it, pressed from the other side as if something had tested the glass, and left proof it knew where I lived. I found the handprint after I convinced myself. The face under the ice was a trick of light, the kind of optical lie. Clear black ice tells when it is smooth enough to show you the lake like a window. It was late afternoon, the sun low and orange, and my little brother Jonah was begging for one more lap before we headed in. The lake was crowded near the shore, kids wobbling, couples holding hands, a dad dragging a plastic sled, but out toward the center it opened into quiet, the ice darker and glassy. We cut across in long arcs, our skates whispering. Every so often the surface would sing that thin, high-grown ice makes when it shifts, and Jonah would laugh like it was the lake cheering him on. I told him to stay near me. He rolled his eyes and pushed ahead anyway. That is when I saw it not in front of him, but under him, a pale shape that did not match any weed or rock. At first, it looked like a smudge, like someone had wiped fog on glass. Then it sharpened into fingers, 5 of them spread wide. The print was too clean. I could see the curve of the thumb, the pad of each fingertip, even faint ridges like a real fingerprint. It was not a crack pattern, or trapped air. It was contact. I stopped so hard my blade scraped, and Jonah, thinking I was playing, spun around and nearly fell. I pointed down. His smile drained away when he saw it. The hand was palm up, pressing toward us, and for a second it looked like it was holding the ice up, like the lake was a heavy lid, and that hand was keeping it from closing. It moved slowly, an inch at a time, matching Jonah as he shifted his weight. When Jonah stepped left, the print glided left. When he stepped back, it followed. There was no ripple, no drift. It was as if the hand was stuck to the underside of the ice and could crawl along it without friction. Jonah lifted one skate, then the other, like he could shake the feeling off. The print adjusted again, and a second hand appeared beside the first, smaller, like a child's. The sound came next, so soft, I thought it was my own blades at first. Tap, 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 a dull knocking that traveled through the ice into my ankles. Jonah's eyes went huge. The tap shifted around, circling under his boots, as if whatever was below was trying to find the spot directly beneath him. I grabbed his jacket and tugged him toward me. The moment he moved, the taps followed, and a thin white line snapped across the ice, like a vein opening. It was not a random crack. It connected the handprint to Jonah like a leash. "Back to shore," I said, and my voice sounded too steady for what I felt. We tried to skate, but our legs had turned stupid, full of caution and panic. Jonah stumbled and when his blade scraped, the ice answered with a sharp pop. Under his left foot, the black glass suddenly turned cloudy, as if something beneath had breathed onto it. The smaller handprint pressed harder. The ice whitened not from snow but from stress, and then Jonah yelped and dropped one knee, punching down into wet slush that should not have been there. For an instant his leg went through up to the shin, not a full break, but enough that the lake touched him. The water was so black it looked solid, until it splashed. Jonah screamed my name, and I fell onto my stomach and grabbed his armpits, trying to spread my weight, the way every winter safety video tells you. His pants darkened as water soaked up. I pulled, and he slid a few inches, then stopped, like something below was holding him. Jonah sobbed. Something grabbed me. I told him no. I told him to kick, to crawl, to do anything but panic. Then I felt it myself. A tug not on Jonah but on the fabric of his pant leg, a steady pressure that did not pulse like current. It was a hand, not clamping, not yanking, but hooking 2 fingers and applying patience. The ice under Jonah creaked. The crack line widened. I kicked my skates out, flattened more, and hauled with everything I had. Jonah slid free, with a wet ripping sound, and as he did, his boot came off and vanished into the hole, sucked down like the lake had swallowed it. Jonah screamed again, and this time it was the sound of someone who knows they were almost taken. We did not stand. We crawled. We belly crawled toward shore, because standing felt like offering the lake a clean target. Behind us the ice began to crack, in a pattern not exploding outward, but advancing in short, timed pops like footsteps, keeping pace under glass. I did not look back until we hit snow at the edge, and rolled onto ground that was not transparent. When I did look, the surface where Jonah had fallen was already sealing slush frosting over into a smooth skin. Beneath that, skin handprints bloomed one by one. Palms pressed up in a slow crowd, as if whatever was under there had brought friends to the window. We ran to the parking lot, and by the time an adult noticed our soaked clothes and Jonah's missing boot, we had turned our fear into words that sounded impossible. They called the county line. A deputy showed up with a flashlight and an attitude, and he walked out, 10 feet, shined the beam on the ice, and said it looked fine. We tried to show him the prints, but the lake was perfect again, black and clean, reflecting the sky like it had never been touched. Jonah kept whispering. It grabbed me, and the deputy told my mum that kids get spooked and ice does weird things. That night, Jonah could not sleep. He kept his wet socks on, as if bare skin was an invitation. At 2:13 a.m., he shook me awake and held up his phone. His screen showed a new voicemail from a blocked number, but the call log said it lasted exactly 3 seconds. We played it. All we heard was 3 knocks, evenly spaced, then silence. Tap, tap, tap. Jonah started crying, the quiet kind that makes you feel helpless. I checked my own phone. I had the same voicemail, same length, same sound. We had not given anyone our numbers, and there was no way the lake could call us, but the message had the same calm rhythm as the tapping under Jonah's feet. In the morning my mom drove Jonah to urgent care for his ankle, and I stayed home pretending I was fine. The house was warm and ordinary, and that should have been a relief. Instead, every surface started to look like ice. To me, every window a possible pain. When the delivery guy dropped a package and left, I found a faint handprint on the outside of our front door glass, too small to be his. When I wiped it, it smeared into a wet, cold streak that smelled like lake water. That night I opened the freezer and saw stuck to the underside of a fresh sheet a perfect little disc of clear ice with a fingerprint trapped inside it, pressed from below as if something had tested a new window and found it just as easy to reach through. 2 days later, the sheriff's office put up new signs at Pine Hollow that said no skating and no fishing, but they never explained why. A week after that, Jonah's missing boot showed up on our porch. Laces tied in a neat bow packed solid with lake ice, like someone had used it as a mold. There was a print on the frozen surface inside the boot, a tiny palm pressed upward. Jonah looked at me and whispered. It followed the warm light. Then my phone buzzed, with a new voicemail 3 seconds long, and when I played it, the knocks were not on a speaker. They came from inside the glass of the screen, right under my thumb. I did not answer, but tapping kept time with my pulse at night. I found out how small a fishing hole really is when something massive used it as a doorway. People talk about ice fishing like it's peaceful, like sitting on a frozen lake is a quiet hobby, but the truth is you're perched on a thin roof over a depth you cannot see, staring into a black circle that could fit an arm, a head, or an eye. I went out to Alder Ridge Lake on a Tuesday because the forecast promised a hard freeze and no wind, and because I was dumb enough to believe that meant safe. By the time the sun dropped, the ice had that clean blue look that makes you trust it, and trust is the first thing a lake takes from you. I was alone, which is the first mistake. The second mistake was using a flasher and telling myself, data equals control. The little screen showed my lure as a bright line and the lake bottom as a hard band far below. For the first hour, nothing happened. The heater hummed, my breath fogged, and the only sound was the occasional distant crack ice settling like a house at night. Then, at 8:41 p.m., a new mark appeared on the flasher deep at first, a thick arc rising from the bottom, at a speed that made no sense. It was not a fish. Fish bounce. Fish hesitate. This thing moved like an elevator. The arc climbed slow and certain until it hovered beneath my lure and stopped. My rod tip trembled, not from a bite, but from pressure in the water like the lake had leaned in. I stared into the hole and tried to see anything in the black. The ice lip glittered with frost. The water itself looked still, but the flasher said something was directly under me, close enough that if it rose another foot, it would touch the underside of the ice. I whispered as if volume mattered, "Nope," and began reeling in. The line came up smoothly for a second, then stopped dead like it had snagged on a rock that was moving. I should have packed up right then. Instead, I did what every curious person does when fear and disbelief collide. I lowered my underwater camera, the little puck on a cord with a dim light around the lens. On the screen, the hole became a bright circle above, and the world below turned green and grainy. Ice from underneath looks like a ceiling, pocked and cloudy, and my lure dangled like bait in a trap. The camera sank 10 feet, 15, 20. The water got darker. Then the camera light caught something pale sliding past, just outside the beam. Not fast, but steady, like a wall moving. The camera swung and showed me the full shape for less than a second because my hands jerked. It was huge, bigger than a car. A pale body with no clear fins, just ridges that looked like muscle under a thin membrane. And then right where a head should be, the screen filled with an eye. Not a fish eye. A round, forward-facing eye with a dark pupil that contracted when my camera light hit it. The pupil tightened like it was focusing on me. The eye did not look confused. It looked irritated like I had shined a flashlight into a bedroom. My line snapped tight and yanked the rod down so hard the handle smacked my knee. I grabbed it and felt the drag scream, not in short pulls like a fish, but in one steady, heavy draw. The water in the hole bulged upward, rising into a dome, and I realized the pressure was coming from below, lifting the surface, like something was pushing its back against the underside of the ice. The ice around the hole made a sound like glass under stress. A thin ring of cracks bloomed outward in a perfect circle, clean and bright, and I knew with a sick clarity that whatever was under me could measure my weight through the ice, the way you measure a knock through a door. Outside, the lake answered with more cracks, a chain of sharp pops that ran away from me, and then back again, like a warning that could travel. My flasher went wild, the arc filling the entire screen, and then the display cut out for a second, as if the battery had dipped. When it came back, the arc was gone. That should have been relief. Instead, it felt like losing sight of a moving truck in fog. I kept my eyes on the hole. The water settled. The ring of cracks stopped spreading. Then something brushed the underside of the ice, and the sound came through my boots more than my ears, a low scraping, slow and deliberate, as if a rough palm was sliding across glass. My bucket shivered. The chair legs pinged once. The camera cord twitched, and the screen showed nothing but darkness and a faint cloud of ice crystals. I reeled the camera up fast, and as it neared the surface, the screen brightened, and I saw a pale shape rise, with it staying just out of the light, keeping pace. It was following my camera like it was following a lure. I stumbled backward and hit the tent wall. My breath came out ragged. I told myself it could not fit. The hole was 8 inches wide. Nothing that big could come up through it. That thought lasted until I heard a soft tap on the ice rim right beside the hole, like a knuckle testing a doorframe. 1 tap, then 2 taps, then 3. A pattern. The same calm rhythm you'd use if you expected an answer. I backed toward the zipper, hand shaking so badly I fumbled it twice. Outside my shelter, I heard a crunch of snow that was not mine, and my blood went cold because snow does not crunch on open ice unless someone is close enough to be standing on my tracks. Headlights swept across the fabric, and my friend Corey's snowmobile slid to a stop a safe distance away. He took 2 steps toward my tent and froze, staring at the ground. Under his boots, a new ring of cracks was forming, centered on him like the lake had drawn a target. He looked up at me confused, and the ice under both of us groaned at the exact same time, as if something below had shifted its weight and listened for our response. Corey did not wait for an explanation. He grabbed my arm and hauled me out, and we ran not back to my original path, but diagonally, because it felt wrong to follow the same line over a surface that had started to respond. Behind us, the ice popped in sequence, chasing, and twice I felt the ground lift a subtle upward pressure, like the lake was breathing against the underside. We reached the shoreline in snow, and only then did the sounds stop. Corey shined his headlamp back toward my shelter. The tent was still there, but the hole was gone, iced over smooth, and in the fresh skin of ice was a faint circle, like a closed eyelid. We never called it in. We packed my gear the next day, staying on the shore, using a rope to drag the shelter off the ice. My drill, my flasher, my chair, all of it came back. The only thing missing was the underwater camera. The cord was cut clean, not snapped, not frayed. That night when I took a shower, the drain gurgled, and the water in the tub swirled into a dark circle that looked exactly like my fishing hole. For a second I thought I saw something pale slide past under the surface of the water, and then the bathroom light flickered, and I heard it not a knock this time, but a slow, heavy breath, like deep water moving under ice. I found the first footprint at 11:48 p.m., a single oval, pressed into wind-polished snow that should have been smooth around my shelter, because I was the only person on Cutler Lake that night. The forecast promised calm, the kind that makes the ice feel thick and trustworthy, and I wanted one quiet set before I drove home. My pop-up tent sat over my hole like a tiny lantern on a black sheet of glass heater, ticking firmer, steaming rod propped between my knees. Outside the fabric, the world was a blank page of snow and starlight, and that is why the footprint caught the light. It was close, maybe 4 feet from the tent wall, crisp enough that I could see tread like someone had planted a boot and lifted it straight up. I stood there, listening, holding my breath, because the lake has its own quiet at night, and any new sound feels huge. Somewhere far off the ice made a long, slow groan like a door settling in its frame. I told myself it was a fox, a deer, something small and light. But the print was human-sized, and the edges were sharp, fresh. I backed into my tent and zipped it shut, not because I thought fabric would stop anything, but because it made me feel less exposed. For 10 minutes, nothing happened. I sat with my hands around the thermos, staring at the hole, watching my line disappear into black water. Then, from somewhere outside, I heard crunching. 1 step, then another, slow, measured. It did not come from a distance. It began close, right at the edge of my light. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The sound moved along my left side, circling my tent. I held my breath and aimed my headlamp at the fabric, and a shadow passed over it, low and heavy. Not the flicker of a rabbit, not the quick dart of a bird. A slow, solid shape that made the nylon dimple in, as if something had leaned close. I did the worst thing, the curious thing. I unzipped the flap an inch and shined my light out. The beam cut across the ice and snow in a clean cone. I saw nothing standing there, but I saw fresh prints where there had been none. A line of boot marks forming a wide circle around my shelter, each one perfectly spaced, each one facing inward. The circle was not complete yet, and as I watched, another print appeared in the snow, deepening, as if an invisible boot had pressed down. The sound matched it, a single crunch, and then the next print appeared, and the next finishing the arc, like someone walking a compass around my tent. The footsteps kept going orbit after orbit, always the same distance, like something pacing a cage. Every once in a while it paused, and I heard a softer sound, like a gloved hand brushing fabric, testing seams. I told myself to run, but the idea of stepping out onto open ice with whatever was making those prints made my stomach clench. At 1:17 a.m., the pattern changed. The steps stopped circling and moved toward my fishing hole. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The sound came closer until it was directly outside the tent floor, right where the ice was exposed. I stared down at the hole as if it could explain itself. The water was still black and flat, reflecting the tiny glow of my heater. Then, from beneath the ice, I heard tapping not on my tent, on the rim of the hole itself. Tap, tap, tap. 3 clean knocks, evenly spaced, like someone asking permission. I did not answer. I sat frozen, staring at the dark circle, trying to slow my breathing. Tap, tap, tap. The knocks repeated slightly louder, and the water in the hole trembled as if something had brushed past under the surface. My flasher flickered and drew a thick mark rising from deep water, climbing slow and sure, then stopping directly beneath my hole. It hovered. The tapping stopped. Outside, a boot scraped the ice lightly, one quiet drag like a finger pulling across glass. The footsteps resumed, but faster now. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The circle tightened. The prints moved closer, the orbit shrinking, until the steps were only a foot from my tent wall. The fabric began to thump softly as shoulders brushed it as the thing walked. I heard the sound of a zipper pull clicking, not mine, but the little metal loop on the outside of the flap, tapped once, twice, 3 times in the same rhythm as the knocks. Tap, tap, tap. Then the entire tent went still, as if the lake had stopped breathing. Something climbed onto the roof. The frame creaked. Snow sifted down the inside walls in a fine powder. A slow, heavy step crossed above my head, compressing the fabric just enough that I could see the outline of a boot sole through it. The boot did not sink the way a real boot would on soft fabric. It pressed and held as if the foot on top was supported by something solid. Another step followed, and then another pacing over me the way it had paced around me. Under my feet the ice answered with a long bending groan, and a thin crack snapped outward from my hole like a vein opening. The zipper at the entrance twitched once, then again. I grabbed the pole from my side, clamped my fist around it, and held it in place. The fabric tugged not hard but patiently, like someone on the other side was testing whether I would let go. The footsteps on the roof stopped directly above the zipper. Tap, tap, tap. The roof was being knocked from above, while the hole was being knocked from below, and I understood with a cold clarity that I was inside the only warm pocket on the lake, and something had decided to surround it from both sides of the ice. My heater clicked off, either out of fuel or out of mercy, and the sudden silence broke something in me. I ripped the zipper down in one violent motion, kicked through the flap, and threw myself onto open ice. Cold hit my lungs like a punch. My headlamp beam swept the lake, and for a heartbeat, I saw a dark shape standing 10 feet away, but the light slid, and there was nothing but empty flatness. Behind me, my tent shook once hard, as if someone had slammed both hands onto the roof. I ran anyway. I ran toward the shorelines, toward anything solid, and the ice popped in a timed sequence behind me. Not random, but stepping matching my pace, with sharp little cracks. I reached snow and fell to my knees. When I looked back, my shelter sat alone on the black glass. Around it was a perfect circle of footprints, dozens of them pressed deep and clean, all facing inward like an audience. There was no trail from the circle to the shore. My own tracks from the run were there in the snow at my feet, but on the ice behind me the surface was smooth, as if I had never crossed it. My phone buzzed once, a voicemail from a blocked number, 3 seconds long. When I played it, I did not hear a voice. I heard crunching footsteps circling, and under them 3 steady knocks like a code I was supposed to ignore. I found the body because I wanted to see a fish. That is the stupid ordinary beginning to something that ruined lakes for me. It was a bright Saturday, the kind of clear winter day that makes the world look harmless, and my buddy Marcus talked me into bringing my underwater camera so we could film trout cruising under the ice. We set up on Redfern Reservoir, where the ice was thick enough to drag a sled. Without worrying, drilled 2 clean holes and pitched a small shelter to block the wind. Families were skating near the inlet, laughing, and the sound carried across the flat surface like it was summer. We dropped the camera down the first hole, the little puck on its cord with a ring of dim LEDs, and the screen on the handset showed the underside of the ice like a cloudy ceiling. Snow drifted, in slow motion. Marcus laughed and said it looked like space. I angled the lens toward deeper water, hoping for a flash of silver, and for a while it was exactly what we expected. Darkness, a faint green haze, a lure swinging like a pendulum. Then, at around 15 feet, something pale entered the edge of the frame. Marcus said, "Is that a log?" and I shook my head because logs do not have a shoulder. The camera light swept and the pale shape resolved into a human arm held out slightly from a torso, the way a mannequin is posed. The sleeve was dark and heavy. A winter jacket, but the hand was bare. The skin looked swollen and waxy, and the fingers hung slightly curled as if frozen in the middle of a grasp. The camera tilted lower, and the rest of the figure came into view. A person standing upright in the water, not floating, not drifting, just standing as if planted. My first thought was that the camera had drifted into a drowned person's boots and was looking up at them, but the angle was wrong. The body was not above us. It was below us, and it was facing the lens, as if it had been waiting. The jacket was zipped. The hood was up. The face was pale and indistinct in the murk, but I could see the shape of a mouth and the shadow of eyes. The worst part was the posture. People do not drown standing up. The body looked arranged, like somebody had set it down carefully and left it there like a warning sign. Marcus reached for my shoulder, like he could pull us both back from the screen. I reeled the cord a few inches, and the camera bobbed. The body did not sway with water the way it should have. It stayed perfectly steady, and then as the camera rose, the body rose with it by the exact same amount. The distance between the lens and the chest stayed constant, as if something invisible was holding the camera and the body in the same grip. Marcus whispered no, like he was refusing an offer. I yanked the cord hard. The camera shot upward, and the screen flashed as it passed the bright circle under the ice. For a second I saw nothing but ice crystals. Then right at the lip of the hole, a pale face filled the frame, pressed close to the underside of the ice eyes open. It was not looking at the camera. It was looking up through the ice toward us. The mouth moved once slow and a cluster of bubbles drifted out like a silent word. I screamed and dropped the handset. It bounced on the mat and the screen went sideways, showing nothing but trembling water and the underside of the ice, like a ceiling trying to close. We should have called 911 immediately, but we packed up and headed for the ramp, hands shaking. By the time I dialed the sheriff, our holes had already filmed over with a thin skin, like the lake was erasing what it showed us in daylight too. The deputy asked for landmarks and listened, but when they arrived and drilled they found only black water and nothing in the beam. They shrugged at the idea of a body that could vanish under ice like a thought, and they left us with a warning about safety and trespassing. That night, I did what I always do when fear is chewing at me. I watched the footage. I plugged the memory card into my laptop and played it full screen, hoping my brain had exaggerated. The video opened with the underside of the ice, then darkness, then the pale arm sliding into view. My stomach tightened because it looked worse on a big screen. When the camera panned to the face, it was clearer than I remembered. The eyes were open. The pupils reflected the camera light with a tiny pinpoint shine. And just above the hood, barely visible, there was a thin dark line running upward, disappearing into the ice ceiling like a tether. I scrubbed forward, frame by frame. The moment the camera started to rise, the body rose too, pulled by that line. It was not standing on the bottom. It was being held up under the ice, like bait. Then came the frame at the lip, the one that had made me drop the handset. On the laptop, the face was unmistakable. It was not bloated the way a drowned face should be after days. It looked fresh, almost flushed under the cold, and the mouth was moving, shaping something. I turned up the audio, even though I knew there would be nothing. There was something, a faint tapping 3 beats under the static hiss of water. Tap, tap, tap. I closed the laptop. I told myself to sleep. At 3:06 a.m. my phone buzzed with a notification: new video file received via AirDrop. I do not use AirDrop with strangers. The sender name was blank. My hands went cold. I opened it anyway because curiosity is a sickness. The file was 10 seconds long, and it was my own camera view underwater, but the angle was wrong. It was looking up through the ice at 2 sets of boots and a round hole. I watched myself kneel at the edge and lower the camera down. The lake light above wobbled, and then the video tilted, as if whoever was holding the camera underwater had shifted their grip. A pale hand entered the frame and pressed its palm flat against the underside of the ice, right beneath my boot fingers, spread like it was measuring my weight. The hand withdrew, and the camera drifted sideways, and for one terrible second the screen showed a row of shapes below. Not fish, not weeds, but bodies, standing upright in the dark hoods. Up faces turned toward the ice ceiling, all of them, looking up. The clip ended with 3 knocks louder, like someone rapping on glass from the other side. The next morning Marcus called me, voice tight, and asked if I had sent him something. Before I could answer, he said he had opened his cooler to pack lunch, and found our underwater camera puck sitting inside dripping lake water, even though it had been on my desk all night. The lens was clean now, too clean, like someone had wiped it for the next. I found out there are 2 kinds of cold on a frozen lake, the cold in the air, and the cold that steps inside with you. Mine arrived at 12:32 a.m. when my tent zipper slid down an inch and a man I had never seen ducked into my shelter like he owned it. I was ice fishing on Kettleback Lake, a wide, shallow place. Locals swear is safe because you can see the shoreline from anywhere. That night, the moon was bright enough to make the ice look like polished stone, and the only other lights were a few distant shacks near the boat ramp. I chose a spot farther out away from people because I wanted quiet, and because I'm an idiot who confuses solitude with control. My pop-up tent was set over a single-hole heater on low rod, balanced across my knees, phone on airplane mode to save battery. Every few minutes, the ice gave a long, tired groan, like a beam settling in an old house, and I kept telling myself that sound meant strength, not weakness. At midnight, I heard footsteps outside, faint crunches crossing wind-packed snow. I assumed it was another angler cutting across to the ramp, so I called out, "Hey, you good?" and got nothing back. The crunching stopped right beside my left wall. The nylon dimpled inward as if someone leaned close enough to fog it, and a shadow passed over the fabric in the shape of a head and shoulders. I reached for my headlamp and shined it at the wall. The light turned the tent bright and made the shadow vanish, but the pressure remained like a face still hovering inches away. Then came the tapping not on the fabric, but on the rim of my fishing hole. 3 steady knocks that vibrated up through the ice and into my boots. Tap, tap, tap. I froze, watching the black water, waiting for a fish to break the surface, but nothing moved except a slow swirl that looked like a breath. Outside, the crunching resumed a half step, then another, circling toward my entrance. I told myself to grab my keys and run, but the thought of unzipping the flap and stepping onto open ice with someone standing there made my throat clamp shut. The zipper at the door twitched once. Not the fabric, not the frame, the metal zipper pull moving like it was being pinched from the outside. It slid down another inch, and cold air slipped in through the gap. I lunged forward and grabbed the pull, but it was already moving under my fingers, tugged by a patient force that wasn't yanking, just testing whether I'd fight. In that moment, the heater clicked off, and the sudden silence made everything louder. My breath, my heartbeat, the faint scrape of something under the ice, like a palm dragging across glass. The zipper dropped fast, not ripped, not snagged, smooth like a practiced hand. The flap opened, and a man crouched and stepped inside. He wore a dark parka, dusted with snow, hood-up gloves on, face mostly hidden by a scarf. He didn't greet me. He didn't even look at my fishing setup. He just stood there in my warm air, staring down at my hole as if he'd been invited to a meeting. I said, "What the hell are you doing?" and my voice cracked like I was 13. He finally turned his head toward me, and in the headlamp glow I saw his eyes were wet and bright, too bright, reflecting like an animal caught in light. Then he smiled, small and polite, and said, You heard it too. I didn't answer, because my brain had snagged on the wrong detail. There were no footprints leading to my tent. I could see out the open flap to the moonlit ice, and the snow around my shelter was smooth, except for my own track line from shore. The man followed my stare and chuckled like I'd made a joke. "You shouldn't fish alone," he said, and stepped closer to the hole. The water in the hole trembled, and a single bubble rose and popped, loud in the quiet. The man lifted his gloved hand and held it over the opening palm down as if he could feel heat rising. The servant too. Tap, tap. 3 knocks came again right under his hand, and he nodded, satisfied like someone had answered a password. I grabbed the ice skimmer like it was a weapon, and told him to get out. His smile didn't change. "It's late," he said softly. "It gets confused." I asked who he was and why he was here. He leaned down close enough that his breath fogged the ice lip and whispered, "Don't give it your name." Before I could process that, he reached into his pocket and produced a small bell. The cheap kind you hang on a tip-up line. He clipped it to my rod without asking the metal, making a tiny click, and that click triggered the ice. A crack snapped from the hole straight to the tent wall, a clean white line, and the tent floor shifted under my boots like the lake had rolled a shoulder. The man didn't flinch. He tapped the bell once with his finger. Ding. Immediately beneath the ice, something slid past a shadow thick as a log, close enough that the hole darkened like an eyelid closing. My flasher, sitting on the mat, lit up with a single heavy mark, rising fast from deep water, then stopping directly under us. The man straightened and looked at me like a teacher waiting for an answer. "See," he said. "It follows the sound." I backed toward the exit, and he moved with me, not blocking, just matching, always keeping himself between me and the hole. Tap, tap, tap. The knocks became louder, impatient, and the water bulged upward as if something pressed its forehead against the underside. The man placed his palm flat on the ice beside the hole, and for a second his glove left a wet print. From below, a second print appeared perfectly aligned, with his fingers spread, pushing up, as if the lake was copying him through a window. The man's eyes flicked to it, and his smile finally faltered. "Too close," he muttered, and grabbed my sleeve. His grip was strong, urgent. "Go. Now. Don't run straight. Don't look back." I yanked free, and stumbled out into the moonlight, lungs burning. The air outside felt sharper, like the lake had teeth. Behind me in the tent, the bell on my rod jingled once. Not from movement, but from a vibration traveling through the line. Ding, ding, ding. 3 clear chimes, perfectly spaced. The man stepped out after me, turning his body to face my shelter like he was guarding a door. For a heartbeat, I thought he was helping. Then I saw his boots. His soles were dry. No snow clung to them. No ice, dust. And when he took a step, he left no print at all. He raised a gloved hand and waved me away, casual as a neighbor. "It likes warm places," he called, and his voice carried too well over the ice, like the lake itself amplified it. I ran toward the shore lights anyway, zigzagging the way you do when you think something is behind you with a gun. Except, this time the gun was the water. Every few strides, the ice popped in a timed sequence under my feet, sharp little cracks that felt like footsteps following beneath the surface. I reached snow and turned, and my tent was still there, but it was shaking gently, as if something inside was breathing. The flap hung open, empty. No man, no shadow. Just my hole now covered by a thin new skin of ice, cloudy and fresh like a scab. In the middle of that cloudy circle was a faint handprint pressed up from below, and when my phone buzzed in my pocket, I already knew what I'd hear. A voicemail, 3 seconds long. Tap, tap, tap. But this time under the knocks, I heard a second sound, a tiny bell chiming once as if someone was still standing on the other side of my door waiting for me to answer. I found the warning on a torn piece of receipt paper taped to the bait shop register, written in shaky marker like someone didn't want to say it out loud. "Don't go out on the lake tonight. It was the kind of note you laugh at on a normal day, the kind of local superstition tourists take pictures of, but the man behind the counter didn't smile. He slid my minnows across the glass and kept his eyes on my hands like he was watching for me to make a mistake. Outside, the sky was clean and pink with sunset, and the lake beyond the trees was already turning black under a thin crust of new ice. I told him I was just going to set a couple tip-ups near shore for an hour. His jaw tightened. "Near shore's where it starts," he said. I asked what he meant, and he tapped the note with one thick finger. "You hear knocking, you keep walking," he added. Then he leaned forward and lowered his voice. Not dramatic, just tired. "If someone calls your name out there, don't answer. If you see lights under the ice, don't follow. And if you find a hole that ain't yours, you get back to land," I said. "Is this about thin ice? Trying to turn it into safety talk?" And he shook his head once. "Ice is fine," he said. "It's what's under it that's restless." That should have been enough. It should have sent me home, but winter makes people arrogant, and the lake looked calm, and I'd driven 40 minutes, and I wanted the story to be a joke. So I thanked him, took my bait, and drove down to the access point anyway. The parking lot was empty. No other trucks, no shacks, no lanterns moving like fireflies across the surface. The only sound was wind in the pines, and the distant creak of ice forming a slow stretching noise like leather. I pulled on my cleats and stepped out, telling myself I'd stay close. My headlamp beam cut across the frozen surface, and the ice was so clear, in places I could see air bubbles trapped like pearls. It felt solid under my boots, but it also felt too alive, singing softly with each step. About 50 yards from shore, I spotted a dark circle ahead, a hole in the snow cover. I hadn't drilled anything yet, so my first thought was that someone had been here earlier and left it. Steam rose from it in the cold air. That made no sense. The temperature was below zero, and open water should have skinned over fast. I approached anyway, stupid curiosity pulling me like a line. The hole was perfectly round, clean as if cut by a machine, and the ice around it was white with stress lines spiderwebbing outward in a ring. In the center, the water was black and still, and when I shined my light into it, the beam didn't seem to go down so much as get swallowed. I turned to leave, and that's when I heard it faint and close. 3 knocks coming from the rim, not from above, but from below. Tap, tap, tap. I froze hard, hammering, because sound travels weirdly on ice, and there was nowhere a person could hide that close without me seeing them. I backed up a step, and the knocks repeated perfectly, spaced as if someone was patient enough to wait for an answer. Tap, tap, tap. I did what the man at the shop told me to do. I kept walking. Every instinct screamed to run, but running on ice is how you end up in the water, and the lake felt like it was listening for panic. I moved toward shore at a steady pace, eyes on my own boot prints, trying not to look at the hole behind me. Halfway back, my headlamp flickered once, and in that brief dimness, I saw something on the ice ahead, a line of footprints leading from the trees to the middle of the lake. The line ended 30 feet from shore at a spot where the snow was untouched, smooth, and perfect. No more prints. Just an abrupt stop, as if whoever made them had stepped off the world. I slowed, scanning the surface, and my breath caught when I noticed the ice at that spot was clearer than the rest, like a window somebody had polished. Under it, deep down, I saw a faint glow, a soft greenish light moving like a lantern in water, and I realized it wasn't a lantern at all. It was a cluster of lights, arranged like points on a face, 2 high, 1 low, the suggestion of eyes, and a mouth. The shape rose slightly, and the light intensified, and I felt the urge to step closer, the way you feel the urge to lean toward a whisper. Then, from the ice itself, my name came quiet and clear, as if someone stood right beside my ear. Avon. I snapped my head around. There was nobody. The trees were still. The parking lot was empty. Evan, the voice repeated, and it sounded wrong, not like a shout carried by wind, but like speech pressed through a wall. My throat locked. I wanted to answer, to say who's there, because answering is what humans do when they hear their name, but the bait shop man's words crashed back into me. Don't answer. I turned and walked faster. The moment I did, the ice popped behind me, a sharp crack like a branch breaking. Another pop followed, then another time stepping as if something beneath was walking toward the sound of my boots. I kept my pace controlled, but my stomach floated because the cracks weren't random stress noises. They were following my rhythm. Pop, pop, pop matching my steps, keeping distance like a predator, shadowing prey. The glow under the ice slid too, staying under the clear window spot for a second, then drifting after me, faint but persistent like headlights seen through fog. Near the shoreline the ice began to sing louder, and I heard a new sound under the cracks, a low scraping like a palm dragging across the underside. My headlamp flickered again, longer this time, and in that half-second of dim light, I saw a pale handprint bloom beneath the surface. Near my next step, fingers spread, pressing up, as if testing the thickness. I stopped mid-stride, weight balanced, terrified to commit. The handprint slid an inch, keeping position beneath my boot, and I felt through the ice a gentle upward pressure, not enough to break, just enough to let me know it was there. Evan. The voice whispered again, closer now, and this time it had a second layer under it, like other voices were trying to copy the sound. I didn't run. I shuffled sideways toward thicker snow, toward land, and the pressure under my boot followed, patient, curious. Tap, tap, tap. 3 knocks sounded again, not behind me now, but under me, right beneath the ball of my foot. I reached the edge, where ice met frozen slush and then solid ground, and I stepped onto snow like it was holy. The popping crack stopped immediately, as if there was an invisible line something couldn't cross. I stood there shaking, shining my light back over the lake. The hole I'd found out there was gone, already skinned over smooth, but the spot where the old footprints ended was clearer than ever, and beneath that window the greenish glow hovered facing me. For a long moment it didn't move. Then slowly the lights rearranged, stretching into the outline of a smile. On my phone, which had been dead all evening, the screen lit up by itself with a voicemail notification from a blocked number. The duration read 003. I didn't need to play it to know what I'd hear, but I did anyway because fear can make you reckless. Tap, tap, tap. This time, right after the third knock, a voice breathed my name like it was tasting it, and in the background I heard the faint jingling of a tip-up bell, like someone was setting lines out there for me patiently on the other side of the ice. I found out the ice can learn your weight when it started cracking all around me in perfect time, like it was practicing my name in a language of glass. I was on Blanchard Lake after midnight because my buddy Tyler swore the bite was better, when the moon was high and the wind died, and because winter makes you arrogant about things that should scare you. We were 2 headlamps on a black sheet, a small pop-up shelter, an auger, and a flasher humming like a tiny heart. The ice felt thick solid, the kind that answers your boots with a dull, confident thunk. At 12:19 a.m., Tyler went back to the truck for extra propane, leaving me alone in the shelter with my line hanging into ink-dark water. I watched the flasher paint my lure as a thin, bright dash, then nothing again. That was when the first crack sounded sharp and close, not the slow groan of settling ice, but a clean pop, like a knuckle against a window. A second pop answered, from the opposite side of the tent. Then a third. 3 pops, evenly spaced, and my stomach went cold because it matched the knocking pattern we'd been joking about all week. I told myself it was temperature shift. I told myself the lake does that. Then the floor under my boots trembled, subtle but undeniable, and a hairline fracture raced outward from my hole, like a white vein, straight as if drawn with a ruler. It stopped exactly at the tent wall, then split left and right, forming a shallow U around me. I backed up, and the U widened the crack line, branching into a ring that circled the shelter, not random, not spidering, but curving with purpose. I unzipped the flap and shined my headlamp out. In the beam, the ice was a map of fresh white lines, spreading in a growing circle centered on my tent like a target. The circle widened 1 inch at a time, and each inch arrived with a pop that landed on the beat of my breathing. When I held my breath, the pops paused. When I exhaled, they resumed. Pop, pop, pop. I snapped my teeth together hard enough to hurt and forced myself to breathe shallow through my nose, and the cracking changed rhythm to match. That's when I understood the worst thing. It wasn't reacting to temperature, it was reacting to me. I stepped forward one cautious shuffle, and the circle shifted forward too, keeping me in its center. I stepped left. The crack line crept left. It moved the way a searchlight moves, tracking. Under the ice, the water in my hole swirled once a slow clockwise turn, like a giant body rolling beneath the surface. My flasher screen flickered and drew a thick mark, rising from deep water, climbing fast, then stopping directly under the hole. The mark was so heavy it filled the entire display. I reeled in without thinking, and my line came up smooth, too smooth, as if something had guided it away. The heater clicked, then died. The sudden silence made the pops louder, and now they came from everywhere, a ring of sharp snaps around the shelter that sounded like footsteps circling outside. I grabbed my phone. No signal, of course, but the screen lit my hands, and in that pale glow I saw a new crack forming under my left boot, curving around the toe like a fingerprint ridge. The ice was drawing me. Outside, the moonlight turned the lake into a mirror, and in that mirror I saw Tyler's headlamp bobbing in the distance, coming back. I wanted to scream for him to run, but my voice felt trapped behind my ribs. As Tyler approached, the cracking slowed as if the lake was listening to his steps. Then it split its attention. A second ring began forming around him, faint at first, then brightening as he got closer. 2 targets, 2 centers. Tyler reached the tent and froze when he saw the lines. "What did you do?" he whispered, like I'd insulted the lake. I told him I hadn't done anything, and the moment I spoke, the ice popped 3 times in quick succession right under the seam between our boots. Tyler flinched and stepped back, and the crack ring around him followed, keeping him pinned. "It's not safe," he said, and grabbed my sleeve. We tried to move together, but the ice fought us with sound. Every time we shifted weight, a new pop answered, and the cracks tightened inward, shrinking the safe area, the way a net tightens around a fish. We did what you're supposed to do on thin ice. Spread out, move, slowly, crawl if you have to. So we dropped to our stomachs and started inching toward shore. The moment our bodies flattened, the cracking eased, as if the lake preferred us upright. For a few feet it worked. Then the pops returned, now directly beneath our chests, not at the edges, and the ice under me lifted a fraction. A gentle upward pressure, like something pushing from below to feel my weight through a membrane. I froze, and Tyler whispered, "Don't move." Under my cheek, I heard the faintest scrape, like a palm sliding along the underside of the ice, searching. Then right beside my ear, the ice popped once, and a thin line opened toward my mouth. It stopped at the edge of my lips, as if it knew where my face was. I clenched my jaw and tasted cold air. Pope. Another line closer. Pope. Another. Tyler began to sob, quiet and furious, and the cracking immediately accelerated around him, as if emotion was vibration, as if fear was a signal. Something in the water beneath us thumped, once deep and heavy. The flasher still on the mat in the tent behind us screamed a single beep, then went dead. In the sudden quiet, we heard it clearly, 3 knocks from below, not cracks, actual taps, traveling up through the ice, steady as a code. Tap, tap, tap. Tyler jerked as if the sound touched his bones. He whispered my name, and the instant he said it, the ice answered with a bright fracture that drew a straight line from beneath his mouth to the dark center of the lake, like a path being offered. I grabbed his collar and hissed, "Don't talk." We crawled again faster, now ignoring good technique, chasing land. Behind us, the cracking followed in a widening wave, not breaking through, just herding, keeping pace with our bodies, the way wolves keep pace with the deer. When we finally reached the snowbank at the edge, the cracking stopped all at once, like a switch flipped. We lay on the shore, panting, staring back at the moonlit ice. In the middle of the lake, far from where we'd been, a new ring of cracks bloomed perfect and round like an eye opening. At its center, a single dark spot appeared, a hole forming as if something below had pressed up and held. Through that spot, faint and greenish, a light glowed from deep water, and it pulsed 3 times in slow rhythm, like a signal calling us by the patterns it had learned. On my phone, which still had no service, a voicemail notification appeared anyway. Duration 003. I didn't need to play it. The lake had already told us what it wanted. But my thumb hit play on its own, and from the speaker came 3 crisp knocks, perfectly spaced, followed by the sound of ice cracking softly like someone smiling behind glass. I tossed the phone into the snow and Tyler dragged me to the truck like we were leaving a crime scene. In the cab, the heater roared, but the warmth only made my ears ring with phantom pops. Halfway home, the windshield fogged, then frosted in thin white arcs from the edges inward, and 3 tiny pits appeared in the ice on my wiper blade, perfectly spaced, like taps from the other side. When I got out, my porch light flickered 3 times on the beat. I found the lights the first time by accident because I leaned over my fishing hole and looked down long enough for the lake to look back. It was Lake Grady, a deep kettle lake with water so dark, locals joke it has no bottom. And I was there just before dawn, chasing that quiet hour when the surface is still and your own thoughts feel loud. The ice was clear black, the kind that makes you feel like you're standing on a window, and my hole was a perfect circle of darkness, rimmed with frost. I dropped my lure and watched my line disappear, trying not to imagine what my boots were hovering over. The flasher showed nothing for a while, just my lure line and the hard band of bottom far, far down. Then, at 5:06 a.m., a faint glow appeared below the band, like a star switching on underwater. It was small, greenish, and steady, not the flicker of my camera, light not a reflection. I blinked hard, convinced it was my eyes, but the glow remained, and then a second glow appeared beside it, then a third forming a loose triangle that drifted upward with unnatural smoothness. They didn't rise like bubbles. They rose like lanterns, as if something below had lifted them carefully. I leaned closer, and the ice under my palms felt colder than air, like it was pulling heat out of me. The triangle of lights paused directly beneath my hole far below, but aligned with eerie precision, and my line trembled once, as if a current had brushed it. On impulse, I lowered my underwater camera, the little puck with LEDs, expecting the lights to scatter like fish spooked by brightness. Instead, the moment my camera entered the water, the 3 glows dimmed, as if hiding, and then reappeared behind it, following just outside the beam. On the screen, the world was murky, green ice crystals drifting like snow, and at the edge of visibility, the lights hovered perfectly round, too steady to be bioluminescent algae. I whispered, "What are you?" and immediately hated myself for speaking to deep water like it could answer. The camera cord twitched, not a tug like a bite, but a gentle pull, as if someone beneath had taken the cord between 2 fingers and tested its weight. The lights moved closer, and for a heartbeat they arranged into something that looked like a face, 2 high, 1 low, the suggestion of eyes and a mouth. The mouth light pulsed once, then twice, then 3 times slow and deliberate. Tap without sound. A message in light. My skin prickled under my coat. I reeled the camera up fast, and the lights rose, with it keeping the same distance as if whatever held them wanted to stay in my field of view. When the camera neared the underside of the ice, the screen flashed bright, and I saw the 3 lights pressed close to the ice ceiling right beneath my boots, as if they were trying to see through the glass at me. I yanked the camera out, and the lake air hit my face like a slap. The ice around my hole was still no cracks, no warning sounds, just a quiet that felt staged. I told myself it was some weird reflection from the sunrise, but the sun wasn't up yet. I packed in a hurry, hands clumsy, refusing to look into the hole again. Halfway to shore, I noticed I wasn't alone. Far out toward the center of the lake there was another hole, a dark circle I hadn't drilled, and above it sat a small red lantern, the kind ice fishermen use to mark a spot. It should have been comforting a sign another person was out early. Instead, it made my stomach drop because there were no footprints leading to it, no sled tracks, no shanty, just a lantern sitting on naked ice as if placed by a careful hand that didn't need to walk. I kept moving and my headlamp beam swept across the surface. As it passed over the lantern, the light beneath the ice flared there too, a faint green bloom directly under that spot like my earlier lights had relocated. Then the lantern above flickered 3 times in perfect rhythm, not with wind, but with timing. I stopped, and the ice under me popped once a sharp crack that sounded like punctuation. I forced myself to keep walking, Behind me faintly I heard a sound. I couldn't place it first, a soft clicking like glass beads tapping together. It was coming from the lake itself, and when I looked down I realized the sound matched the way the underwater lights were pulsing, as if light and sound were two sides of the same signal. At the shoreline I turned and stared back. The red lantern was still out there, perfectly still, and beneath it the green glow hovered, faint but persistent, like a pair of eyes watching through tinted glass. That was when my phone buzzed. No service out there, no notifications expected, but the screen lit anyway with a voicemail from a blocked number. Duration 003. I didn't play it. I didn't want to give the lake my attention in a form it could use. I drove home with the heater blasting, trying to focus on ordinary things like coffee and traffic. But at a stoplight, my dash reflected in the windshield, and in that reflection I saw 3 small green points glowing in the dark glass, aligned like a face peering in. I blinked, and they were gone, but the after-image stayed burned into my eyes. That afternoon curiosity won, as it always does. I set my camera on the kitchen table and replayed the clip frame by frame. In the clean light of my house, the underwater scene looked clearer, worse. The 3 lights approached the lens, and I could see faint outlines around them like translucent shapes holding the glow inside. Then, in one frame, my camera light caught something reflective above the lights, a thin line running upward, disappearing into the ice ceiling, like a tether. In the next frames, the tether multiplied dozens of thin dark lines stretching up like roots pressed against glass, and at the ends of those roots, faint, pale shapes that looked like fingertips. Hands. Many of them arranged in a circle under the ice, around my hole, as if the lights were bait, and the hands were waiting for whatever answered. I slammed the laptop shut. My heart was racing, and my palms ached, like I'd been pressing on ice for hours. That night, I woke to my bedroom window, glowing green. Not bright, just a faint wash, like streetlight, except there is no green streetlight on my street. I sat up and listened. The house was silent, but from the glass I heard a soft, steady, clicking 3 beats. A pause, then 3 beats again, like someone tapping a code with fingernails. I didn't get up. I stared at the window until the glow faded and dawn turned everything normal. The next morning, my freezer ice tray had frozen strangely. One cube was not a cube at all, but a perfect round disc, clear as lake ice. And inside it were 3 tiny air bubbles, arranged in a triangle. When I held it up to the light, the bubbles glowed faintly green for a second, and my phone buzzed with a new voicemail notification. Duration 003. I hit play before I could stop myself. Tap, tap, tap. Then under the knocks, a low watery click like beads, and a quiet breath that sounded like deep water moving under glass, as if the lake had finally found a window in my house and was turning its lights on to see if I'd look down again. I threw the phone into a drawer and dumped the weird ice disc into the sink, but it didn't melt. It slid down the drain with a soft clink, and for a moment the dark circle of the drain glowed green from below 3 points, pulsing like a patient smile. Then the faucet tapped twice. I realized the lake could move faster than me the moment a snowmobile without lights started chasing my shadow across the ice. I was skating late the way you do when the town rink is crowded and you want the clean, empty space of a frozen lake, and I kept telling myself it was safe because the surface looked thick and smooth and the shoreline houses were close enough to see. That was my first mistake, thinking distance on a lake is the same as distance on land. The second mistake was going out alone, with only my phone and a headlamp, because light is a beacon out there, and sometimes the lake answers beacons. Cutler Lake was quiet, windless, and flat as black glass, under a thin dusting of snow, and my blades whispered as I looped wide circles, listening to the ice sing under my weight. I had just turned toward the far end away from the access point, when I noticed a new set of tracks in the snow. A straight line, like skis, or a sled running from the tree line to the center. No footprints beside it, just a dragged mark that ended abruptly, as if whatever made it had lifted clean off the surface. I slowed, and the cold air felt heavier, like it was waiting. Then I heard the engine. It didn't come from the parking lot, It rose behind me, a low growl that swelled into a sharp, hungry whine, and I spun and saw nothing but darkness. My headlamp beam swept the lake, catching glitter in the snow, and for a second it reflected off something metallic far away. A snowmobile silhouette. No headlight, no tail light, just a shape cutting across the ice like a black insect. The engine note climbed closing distance fast. I raised my arm and waved, assuming it was a local out joyriding, and my wave felt stupid the moment the machine changed course directly toward me. No hesitation, no curve, a straight line, like an answer. I pushed hard skates, biting, and the lake accepted my speed with a long, bending groan. Behind me the engine surged, and the snowmobile's shadow stretched ahead of it, reaching for my feet. I looked for the driver's outline and saw only a hunched mass on the seat, bundled or maybe not even a person at all because the posture never shifted. Most riders bounce lean correct. This thing stayed perfectly centered, as if it didn't need balance. The ice popped once under my left blade, a clean crack like punctuation. I didn't stop. I angled toward shore, but the snowmobile matched my angle, exactly cutting the corner so clean it felt like it knew where I was going before I did. My headlamp flickered, and the moment the beam dimmed, the engine pitch changed, as if the machine preferred the dark. I fumbled my phone and tried to call, but the screen showed no service. Of course, it didn't. The lake was always a dead zone when it wanted to be. I shoved the phone back and focused on staying upright because falling meant being slow, and slow felt like surrender. The snowmobile was close enough now that I could hear the track chewing snow, a gritty rattle that blended with the ice's singing into one sick rhythm. Then the sound I feared most cut through everything. 3 knocks from beneath the ice, perfectly spaced, traveling up through my blades into my shins. Tap, tap, tap. I nearly tripped because the taps landed on the beat of my strides like the lake was counting me. The snowmobile responded by surging, and in the dim light I saw the surface ahead whiten with stress lines, thin cracks blooming in a ring that moved with me, keeping me centered like a target. I had seen that before. The lake was drawing me again. I forced myself to change rhythm, shorter strides, a stutter step, and the tapping changed too, adjusting instantly, as if something below was listening to my pattern and copying it. Behind me, the snowmobile's engine dropped for a second, not slowing, just shifting, and the machine drifted sideways, trying to herd me away from shore and toward the open middle. I could feel it in the angle, the way the shadow pressed me, the way the ice under my feet grew colder, more brittle. I veered hard left, and the ice answered with a sharp pop, pop, pop. 3 cracks in quick succession, and for an instant a hairline fracture raced ahead of me like a white arrow pointing to the center. My chest burned. My mouth tasted metal. I risked a glance back and saw the snowmobile close enough that the air behind it churned my breath into a ragged plume. Still no lights. Still no visible face. But I saw something else. The track behind it wasn't leaving the usual churned path. The snow stayed smooth, as if the machine floated an inch above the surface. That should have been impossible, and yet the engine sound was real, vibrating the ice, making my teeth ache. I aimed for a cluster of shoreline reeds I could use as a landmark, and that was when the lake showed me the trap. Ahead in the faint moonlight there was a dark patch on the ice, an area of clear black where the snow had been scoured away like a window someone had polished. It hadn't been there when I started. Now it sat directly in my line to shore. In that clear patch, I could see down, and what I saw made my legs lock. 3 faint green points glowing in a triangle far below, pulsing slowly like a signal. The snowmobile engine rose to a scream. I understood in a flash that the machine wasn't chasing me to hit me. It was chasing me to line me up over that window. At the last second I threw my weight sideways, carving a desperate arc. My blade cord skidded and I went down hard on my hip. Pain flashed white. My headlamp swung and for a heartbeat its beam pinned the snowmobile as it reached me. The driver's seat was empty. No hands on the bars. No boots on the rests. Just the machine moving by itself, and on the handlebar where a headlight switch should have been, I saw a strip of ice stuck there with a perfect fingerprint pressed into it from the other side. The snowmobile didn't stop. It slid past me in a clean line and circled engine steady like a shark turning for another pass. From beneath my palms, the ice answered with a soft scraping, like a hand sliding along glass, and an upward pressure kissed my skin through my gloves, gentle and curious. I crawled, scrambling to my skates, and the tapping started again beneath me. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't stand fully. I half crouched, pushing with my hands skittering like an animal, and somehow I gained distance inch by inch toward the snowy edge where ice met slush and then solid ground. The snowmobile drifted alongside, matching my crawl speed perfectly, as if it could afford patience. When I reached the shoreline and my glove finally grabbed a tuft of grass, the engine cut out instantly, like a switch flipped. The sudden silence was worse than the chase. I rolled onto snow chest, heaving, and shined my headlamp back onto the lake. The snowmobile sat on the ice, 10 yards away, perfectly still, and in the clear black patch near where I'd fallen, the green lights pulsed, once, twice, 3 times, like a satisfied breath. My phone buzzed in my pocket. No service, no reason, but a voicemail notification appeared anyway. Duration 003. I hit play before I could stop myself. Tap, tap, tap. Under the knocks faintly, I heard an engine idle for a moment, and then a soft click like a kill switch being flipped by a hand that wasn't there. Later, my skate blades showed 3 tiny dents, evenly spaced like knocks caught in steel. I never skated that lake again. Not once. Ever. The island wasn't there yesterday, and that's why it felt like a message meant for me. Yesterday, Ridgeway Lake was a clean oval of ice and wind-scoured snow. I skated it in daylight, end to end, with nothing in the middle but a darker seam where the water dropped deep. No island on the map, no rock outcropping, no brush pile. Then a hard freeze hit overnight, the kind of cold that makes windows sing, and in the morning, a low dark hump sat dead center on the lake, dusted with snow like a kneeling animal. From shore it looked solid, 40 feet across, with a few sticks poking up like dead reeds. The strangest part was the ring around it, a perfect orbit of boot prints, as if someone had walked circles to admire it. No other tracks on the lake. No sled lines, no shanties, just that ring, floating in the middle of empty ice. My friend Leah showed up with coffee stirred and said what my brain kept refusing to accept. It wasn't there. We could have left. We should have. But curiosity always finds a reason to wear. We told ourselves it had to be a pressure heave, an ice ridge that pushed up and froze into a mound. Maybe people had checked it out at dawn and left. Maybe it was nothing. So we laced up and skated out blades, whispering headlamps off, because the sun was up and bright. The farther we went, the quieter everything got, like the lake was swallowing sound. Up close, the island wasn't rock at all. It was layered ice slabs, piled and fused into a rounded dome, too circular to be natural. The boot prints around it looked wrong too. Each one was identical in depth and angle, perfectly spaced, like a stamp rather than a step. Leah slowed and asked if I heard that. At first I heard only our skates. Then I caught a faint clicking under the ice, 3 beats, and a pause like glass beads tapping together from far below. Click, click, click. Pause. Click, click, click. When we stopped, the clicking stopped instantly, as if it had been listening for our movement. A thin ring of white stress lines bloomed in the ice ahead of us, encircling the mound like a halo. It widened an inch at a time, and every inch arrived with a soft pop that traveled through my ankles. I felt the same sick recognition I'd felt on other lakes, a target forming not from temperature, but from attention. Leah grabbed my sleeve and whispered we were turning around. I agreed, but my eyes stayed on the mound because it looked less like an island and more like a lid. Then the lid breathed. The mound lifted barely a slow upward flex that sent a sheet of snow sliding off its top. A black line flashed at its base water, then sealed over again, like a mouth closing. Leah's phone buzzed. No service out here, but a voicemail notification appeared anyway. Duration 003. Her thumb hit play like she couldn't stop herself. Tub, tap, tap. Not speaker noise knocked so crisp it felt like someone rapped on the glass of the phone from the inside. At the third knock, the mound split down the middle, with a clean seam, revealing a narrow, dark slit. A faint, green glow rose from that slit, 3 points arranged in a triangle, pulsing, once, twice, 3 times, like a face, learning how to smile. Under our skates, the ice answered with 3 sharp pops in reply. Leah swore and turned to run. Her blade caught a hairline crack and she went down hard. The stress ring tightened around her, instantly brightening like a net cinching. I dropped beside her to spread weight, grabbed her jacket and tried to pull her flat. Through my gloves, I felt a gentle upward pressure under the ice, not breaking through, just touching, as if a hand beneath the surface had pressed up to measure our warmth. Leah sobbed. "It's under us," and the ice popped once directly under her mouth, like it was marking where her voice came from. I hissed at her not to talk, and dragged her on her stomach, both of us crawling backward, messy and desperate. Behind us, the slit widened a fraction, the green glow brightening, and the clicking returned faster excited. Click, click, click. Pause, click, click, click. The boot prints in the ring looked clearer now, and my stomach flipped when I saw the detail inside. Each tread impression was a faint oval, like the pad of a fingertip pressed into glass. Not footsteps. Hand stamps. Something had pressed up from below and printed the idea of human walking to lure us closer. We crawled toward shore and the ice cracked in timed pops that matched our movement, not breaking through, just herding, keeping us inside the invisible boundary of the ring. The moment my glove touched gritty shoreline snow, the pressure vanished as if we'd crossed a line it couldn't follow. The clicking stopped. The cracks went quiet. We rolled onto land and stared back. The mound was sealed again. No slit. No glow. From the bank it looked harmless, almost boring, like a drifted pile of snow you'd never notice. Leah held up her gloves. On the palms were faint white finger marks, frost-shaped as if something cold had pressed from below and left its signature through the ice. All afternoon we tried to explain it away. Pressure heave. Panic. A trick of light. That night I slept badly, and every time I closed my eyes I saw that green triangle pulsing under glass. In the morning I drove back in full sun, determined to prove it had been nothing. Ridgway Lake was flat and empty. No mound. No ring. No prints. Just smooth snow and clear black ice reflecting sky. Relief lasted one breath. At the exact center where the island had been, a perfect circle of clearer ice gleamed polished like a window. Under that window, deep down, 3 green points glowed in a triangle waiting. My phone buzzed even with no service. Voicemail. Duration 003. I didn't play it. The ice did it for me. Under my boots came 3 soft pops, evenly spaced like knocks traveling through a door. Out on the lake, the clear circle darkened as if an eyelid closed, and the surface began to rise, slowly, patiently, rebuilding the island because it had heard I'd returned. On the drive home, Leah kept replaying the voicemail, though I told her to stop. Each time the 3 knocks hit the car, speakers made a rattling click like something was tapping along from inside the dash. We didn't talk about calling anyone, because what do you report an island that opens and closes like a mouth? Instead, we sat in her driveway with the engine idling, staring at our phones as if they were contaminated. At 3:03 p.m., both of our screens lit up at the same time, with a new voicemail from a blocked number. Same duration. Linlin's son. Same knocks. Tap, tap, tap. Only this time, there was a second sound behind them. That bead-like clicking we'd heard under the ice. 3 quick clicks, a pause, then 3 again. Like something confirming the pattern had followed us off the lake. Leah deleted every voicemail. I deleted mine. The notifications came back anyway, as if deletion was just another kind of attention. That evening I rinsed my gloves in the sink, trying to scrub away the frost marks, and the water in the basin swirled into a dark circle before it drained. For 1 second, the reflection in that circle showed 3 green points, arranged in a triangle, and my stomach dropped, because the sink looked exactly like a fishing hole. I shut off the faucet and listened. From the plumbing, came 3 taps, evenly spaced like knuckles on a pipe, and then silence, as if something had tested the new door and decided to wait. Not yet. I found out the ice doesn't always break like a sudden accident. Sometimes it opens like a decision. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, when the lake was crowded enough to feel safe, families dragging sleds, teenagers skating in circles, and a couple guys running an auger near a cluster of tip-ups. I was with my cousin Bree, and we were cutting across the widest part of Clearwater Pond, because the middle looked like the smoothest route back to the parking lot. The surface was black ice, dusted with a thin veil of snow, just enough to give traction, just enough to hide the glass beneath. Every step made that soft squeak you get when rubber meets hard frost. Bree was talking about dinner plans, and I was half listening, half watching. The faint cracks under the snow, the way you watch branches over a roof in wind, looking for the one that might snap. That's when I heard 3 taps. Not from above, not from skates, but from below. A dull knock traveling up through my soles. Tap, 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 tap. I stopped mid-step. Bree took another pace and turned annoyed. What she said. I told her to listen. She rolled her eyes, then her expression tightened because the taps came again, closer, directly under us. Tap, tap, tap. The crowd noise on the far shore felt suddenly distant, like the lake had put cotton in my ears so I'd only hear it. I looked down and the snow over the ice seemed to dim as if a shadow passed beneath. A thin white line appeared at my toe, not spreading randomly, but drawing a curve that hooked toward Bree's ankle. Bree laughed nervously and said, "It's just settling." Then the ice beneath her foot softened, not cracking loudly, but turning to slush in a perfect oval like a mouth forming. Her leg dropped to the knee, in one smooth, horrifying motion. She didn't fall forward. She fell straight down, as if the lake had removed the floor under one specific point. Bree screamed my name, and the sound made the ice answer with a sharp pop that radiated outward in a clean ring. I threw myself flat, crawling toward her, spreading my weight, like every safety poster says, but the snow under my palms felt wrong, slick, as if it was being warmed from below. Bree's hands clawed at the ice edge, and her fingers slipped because the rim was wet, not frozen. "Something's pulling," she gasped, and I said no, because that word makes it real. I grabbed her wrists. Her skin was icy through the gloves. I pulled, and she rose an inch, then stopped as if a hook had caught her boot. The water around her shin rippled without wind. Under the clear patch of ice by her knee, I saw a pale shape move, not a fish darting away, but something broad sliding close to the surface. Bree's body jogged downward again, and this time I felt it a steady tug transmitted through her bones, patient and strong, not like current, but like fingers. I dug my elbows into the ice, braced, and hauled until my shoulders burned. Bree came up another few inches, and her boot surfaced, and for one stupid second I thought we were winning. Then her boot vanished again, yanked down so fast, it splashed water up onto the ice like black ink. Bree screamed, and the scream changed, turning into a choking sob because water hit her thigh, then her waist. The hole widened without cracking the way. Fabric tears when you pull the seam. I saw her coat hem vanish into dark water, and I knew if she went under, she was gone. I shouted for help, but my voice sounded thin, swallowed. People looked, but they were too far, and on ice distance is a trap. I tightened my grip and leaned back, using my weight, and Bree's face rose, eyes wild, breath smoking. That's when I saw the thing that was pulling her. Not fully, not a monster leaping out just enough through the clear black ice beside the hole for my brain to register shape. A hand pale and too long pressed against the underside. Fingers splayed knuckles bending as it gripped Bree's boot like an anchor. The hand wasn't clawing. It was holding calmly as if it had all the time in the world. And above the hand, through the glass, I saw a face, not floating up, but angled, looking up at us, from beneath, eyes open, watching the struggle like entertainment. Its mouth moved once, and a cluster of bubbles slipped out and froze under the ice ceiling like beads. Tap, tap, tap. The sound came again, but now it came from inside the hole from the water itself, like knuckles on the rim. The hand under the ice tightened. I felt Bry's wrists start to slide in my grip, and panic turned my hands stupid. I hooked my thumb into her glove cuff and yanked hard enough to hurt her. She screamed, and the lake responded with a groan that rolled under us like a deep breath. The ice around the hole clouded, whitening with stress, and I realized the lake was trying to hide what it showed me. I did the only thing I could think of. I slammed my free fist down on the ice beside the hole. 3 hard knocks, not as an answer, but as a challenge. Tap is tap. Tap. The moment I did the hand under the ice, paused, as if listening. The face's eyes shifted to me. For one heartbeat, the pulling stopped, and Bree rose half a foot, gasping. I used that moment to drag her sideways, not up, away from the hole's center. The ice under her torso held, and the hole tried to follow, widening toward her like a sliding mouth. But the moment her hips cleared, the hole snapped smaller, not freezing, not healing, just shrinking like a pupil. Bree's legs were still in. I pulled again, and her boots finally broke free with a wet, ripping pop. Water surged, and for a second a pale hand shot up through the hole, not grabbing at Bree, now grabbing at air, reaching for the warmth. The fingers curled, then flattened on the rim, and I saw nails like small hooks. Then the hand withdrew smooth and controlled, and the hole skinned over in seconds with a thin, cloudy layer, as if it had never been open. Bree lay on the ice, shaking, soaked to the waist, lips blue. People finally ran toward us, crawling, sliding ropes, shouting instructions that sounded like they were underwater. A man in a float suit grabbed Bree and hauled her toward shore, while I crawled behind, watching my hands leave wet prints. Behind us, the spot where she'd fallen looked normal again, just a faint circle in the snow, like a bruise. But beneath that circle, through a clear patch, I saw the face one last time, farther down. Now, eyes still open, following Bree's movement toward land, and beside it dozens of pale shapes arranged in a ring, like hands pressed to glass. On the ambulance ride, Bree kept whispering. It knew my weight. It waited until I stepped right. I tried to tell her she was in shock. Then my phone buzzed with a voicemail from a blocked number. Duration 003. I didn't play it. Bree's eyes flicked to the screen anyway, and she whispered, "Don't answer." That night I dreamed I was back on the ice, looking down through clear, black glass, and beneath it, my own boot was held in a pale hand like a toy. When I woke, my bathroom sink was full of water, even though the faucet was off and the surface was perfectly still. Then from the drain beneath the water, 3 soft knocks traveled up through porcelain into my fingertips. Tap, 2, tap. I stared at the sink until my hands cramped, and in the mirror above it, I saw a faint oval of fog bloom, like a window on black ice. Inside the fog, a pale palm pressed once slowly, and the glass answered with a single quiet pop. Not tonight. I found the figure at the center of the lake because the night was too still to feel natural. It was Greenwood Lake, a wide plate of black ice bordered by pines, and I was out there after a late shift with 4 friends who liked skating under headlamps like winter was a private club. The shore lights were visible from anywhere, which is how we convinced ourselves we were safe. The surface was clear enough that our beams looked like stars, trapped under glass, and every few minutes the ice sang a long, low note, like an old house settling. We stayed near the inlet at first, looping lazily, drinking coffee, laughing at how our breath looked like smoke. Then Logan pointed with his glove and said, "Is that someone?" Far out toward the exact middle of the lake stood a dark, upright shape. At first it looked like a post, some marker left for fishermen, but as we watched it shifted a fraction like a person adjusting their stance. Brianna, always first, to break tension, said, "No way. Someone's out there," and started skating toward it, like the lake was a stage, and she wanted front row. The rest of us followed because nobody wants to be the cautious one until it's too late. Distance on ice lies to you. The shore seems close until it suddenly doesn't. As we approached, the shape resolved into a person standing perfectly still at the center. No lantern, no shelter, No tracks. Just a figure in a dark coat with the hood up, arms hanging, feet planted as if the ice had grown around them. Our headlamp beams hit the coat and didn't reflect the way fabric should. The light seemed to soak in, making the person look flatter than real, like a cutout pasted onto the night. Logan called, "Hey, you okay?" The figure didn't move. The only response was the ice beneath us going quiet. The squeak of blades stopped, as if the surface had turned from frosted to polished glass. Then I felt it 3 soft knocks, traveling up through the ice into my ankles. Tap, to the tap, tap. I froze mid-glide. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. No one answered, and for a second I thought it was only me, until the knocks came again louder, and Brianna's smile cracked. Tap, tap, tap. The figure lifted its head a fraction, and I knew without seeing a face that it was looking at us. Not at our lights, at us. "Back up," I said, but my voice sounded small. Logan laughed once brittle, and took one more glide forward. The ice popped under his skate, a single sharp crack like punctuation. A faint, cloudy ring appeared around the figure's feet, like frost blooming from below in a perfect circle. It wasn't spreading randomly. It was expanding outward in measured increments, 1 inch at a time, each inch arriving with 3 tiny pops. Pop, pop, pop. As the ring widened, my blades began to feel sticky, like the ice had grown a thin film that grabbed at steel. Logan tried to turn back, and his skate caught, not on snow, on nothing. He stumbled and dropped his glove. The glove hit the ice and slid a few inches. Under it, beneath the clear surface, a pale handprint bloomed, palm up, perfectly aligned, as if the lake had raised a hand to catch it. The print pressed harder, whitening the ice around it, then slid to stay beneath Logan's shadow when he shifted. "Okay, nope." Logan muttered and started retreating. The figure didn't chase. It simply raised one hand, slowly palm forward like it was pressing against an invisible wall. Under our skates, more pale prints appeared beneath the surface, scattered at first, then gathering into a loose circle that began to close. My phone buzzed in my pocket, even though it was in airplane mode. I didn't look. I didn't want to give whatever was under the ice another way to touch me. "Everybody low," I said, and dropped into a crouch, trying to spread my weight. The others copied me, awkward and terrified. The sticky feeling eased for 1 heartbeat, like the lake was reconsidering. From the center, the figure lowered its raised hand and beckoned with 2 fingers, curling them inward like a hook. The cloudy ring brightened, and the prints under us surged closer in unison, sliding beneath the glass with the smooth coordination of a net tightening. Brianna tried to joke again, but her voice died when the figure spoke. The sound came from inside the hood, soft and intimate, and it said her name in Brianna's own voice. Brianna froze, eyes wide, because hearing yourself used like that is a kind of violation your body understands instantly. The voice repeated her name closer, like it was pressed through a wall. Tap, tap, tap. The knocks rose from below, not cracks now, actual taps that traveled up into our bones. The ice under Brianna's skates clouded abruptly, frost blooming from beneath. Her blades sank a fraction, not breaking through just enough to trap. She tried to lift a foot, and couldn't. The lake had pinned her with suction like a hand under the ice had pressed up and held. We grabbed her arms and pulled. She slid 1 inch at a time, leaving shallow grooves. Beneath each groove, pale hands pressed up following her path like they wanted her ankles. Brianna began to sob, and every sob seemed to trigger 3 quick pops under her ribs, like the lake was keeping time with fear. We stopped trying to skate, and started crawling, dragging, sliding, anything to keep moving toward land. As soon as our bodies flattened, the suction eased. We gained speed, miserable and slow, while the figure at the center stayed perfectly still watching. Behind us, the ice popped in a straight line toward the shore, 3 beats at a time, as if something beneath was laying stepping stones for itself. Pop, 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 pop. The rhythm matched our crawling, keeping distance the way a predator keeps distance while it learns you. When we finally reached the snowbank and rolled onto land, the popping stopped instantly, like an invisible border had been reached. We lay there, gasping faces burning with cold. I forced myself to look back. The figure, was still at the center, framed by moonlight. Around it, the cloudy ring had become a perfect circle, like an eye. Deep under the glass inside that eye, faint pale shapes hovered, angled upward faces, too many to count, watching us leave like an audience behind a window. My phone buzzed again. Voicemail. Duration 003. Against every instinct I played it. Tap, tap, tap. Raid nu. Then very faintly the sound of skates gliding on ice, but not above the surface beneath it, like something had learned our movement and was practicing under the glass for next time. The next morning the lake looked innocent again, but the local page posted photos, a single set of skate marks, leading from the access point, straight to the center, no loops, no hesitation, ending at a perfect circle of cloudy ice. In the middle of that circle was a dry, boot-shaped indentation on top of the surface, as if someone had stood there without ever arriving. The comments argued about pranks, and wind, and physics, but nobody could explain why there were no return marks. That night, my phone lit up at 3:00 a.m., with a blocked voicemail 003, and my bedroom window flashed faint green 3 times before going dark. Quietly, I played it at sunrise, only 3 taps and a faint glide like blades moving under glass. When I touched the window, my fingers left fog, and in that fog 3 points appeared, pulsing like a smile. Just 4. I wiped it away, but the glass felt colder when my fingers touched like lake ice. Again. I found the hole because it was the wrong kind of perfect. At 2:18 a.m. the lake looked like black glass, dusted with powder, and my headlamp carved a pale tunnel as I walked out to check my tip-ups. I'd set 3 flags before sunset in a wide triangle, close enough to see shoreline lights if I turned my head far enough that the silence felt private. The first 2 were fine. Then I reached the third, and saw the snow nearby look swept, like someone had brushed it in a slow oval. It wasn't a circle. It was a long, clean shape, about 6 feet by 2, and the ice beneath it was different, clearer, darker, with a seam around the edge so precise it looked manufactured. Not a fishing hole. A person-sized cut, replaced like a lid. I stared down at my warped reflection and turned in a full circle, searching for tracks. There were none. No footprints leading, in no sled grooves, no auger shavings, no lantern. Just my own boot path from shore. The air above that seam felt colder than the air above normal, ice like the lake was exhaling through a crack. Then the lid knock. Tap, tap, tap. Not a groan, not a crack. 3 deliberate taps traveling up through the ice into my soles. My throat went dry. I backed up a step. Tap, tap, tap. The seam whitened with stress, and the surface flexed by a fraction like an eyelid trying to open. I told myself to leave. I even took 2 steps away until my nearest tip-up flag snapped down. The line was pulling. A bite finally ordinary and exciting, the kind that usually makes you grin. I knelt and took the spool in my gloved hand. The pull was heavy and smooth, no frantic jerks, just steady pressure, moving away from me like a slow winch. I started reeling. The line came in without fight, and that should have been relief, but the tension had a direction it angled straight toward the person-sized lid, as if whatever I'd hooked wasn't swimming under the lake but walking under the ice toward that door. I stopped reeling. The line kept sliding, humming through my fingers. Behind me, the lid tapped again louder. Tap, tap, tap. This time the taps traveled along the edge, as if knuckles were moving around the seam, testing for a latch. My flasher, sitting on the sled, flickered once, then drew a thick mark, rising fast from deep water and stopping directly beneath my hole, too heavy to be a fish. The pull on my line changed into a gentle tug, patient checking whether I'd resist. I wrapped the line once around my glove to hold it, and immediately the tug answered with another matching my strength, like it had learned my limit. The ice under my boots popped once, then twice, then 3 times, perfectly spaced, like punctuation. My headlamp beam shook as I turned back to the lid. In the clear black center I saw something pale pressed close to the underside of the ice fingers. a hand palm up long and human splayed against the lid as if it wanted to lift it. Frost whitened around the fingertips and tiny bubbles clung above the knuckles like frozen beads. The hand slid an inch along the seam, searching for leverage. And that's when I understood the trick. The bite wasn't food. It was a line on a hook, meant to pull me close enough to look down. The spool in my hand whined as the line started paying out on its own, sliding toward the lid like it had been threaded under a door. I dropped it. The line hissed across the ice and vanished at the seam. Tap, tap, tap. The lid flexed again, and fresh stress lines bloomed exactly along the cut, as if the ice refused to crack anywhere else. From out on the lake beyond my headlamp I heard footsteps. Crunch, crunch. Slow, steady steps across hard snow. Relief hit me so hard, it almost made me shout. I did shout. Hey, over here. My voice bounced too clean off the flat surface. The footsteps stopped. Then from the dark, my own voice answered back, perfectly copied. Over here. The cadence was wrong, like a recording stripped of breath. It repeated closer, and the lid knocked again, impatient. Tap, tap, tap. The wind rose suddenly, a thin knife across the ice, and with it came a whisper that didn't travel from any direction. It arrived inside my hood, pressed to my ear. Lay down. I spun beam swinging. The lake was empty. Lay down, the whisper, repeated almost gentle like instruction. The ice under me popped 3 times in quick succession, and a hairline fracture drew itself toward my boots and stopped as if marking where I stood. I ran fast, but careful, back toward shore. Behind me the ice popped in 3-beat sequences that matched my pace. Pop, 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 pop. I didn't look back until my cleats hit snow. In the distance, the person-sized lid was no longer flush. One corner had lifted an inch, like an eye cracking open. Under that small gap, 3 faint green points glowed from deep water, aligned like a face peering up through a slit. The glow pulsed once, twice, 3 times, slow and satisfied. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't need to check the screen to hear it in my bones. Tap, tap, tap. I drove home with my gear half packed, and my line still out there somewhere under that door. In daylight, I came back with 2 friends and an auger, pretending the sun could make it normal. The lake was smooth and innocent. The exact spot where the lid had been was flawless. No seam, no sweep marks, nothing to prove I hadn't hallucinated. But my third flag was gone. Near the shoreline, pressed into fresh snow as if someone had tested the ground, was a long oval imprint, the size of a body, perfectly centered, and beside it were 3 fingertip dents, evenly spaced like knocks left in snow instead of ice. Halfway to the parking lot, the wind died again, and the silence felt staged. Behind me across the open lake, I heard a soft metallic jingle like a tip-up bell tapped 3 times. Ding, ding, ding. I turned, and in moonlight I could just make out my gear sled still sitting on the ice, where I'd dropped it perfectly upright as if set back in place. The line that had hissed away was gone, not snapped, simply absent, as if it had been reeled in from below. I drove home with my shoulders locked. When I stepped onto my porch, the light flickered 3 times, and my phone lit up with a new voicemail. 003. I didn't play it. I didn't have to. At 3:00 a.m., I woke to knocking from beneath the house 3 beats at a time, moving along the floorboards as if something was learning where my weight rested. Tap, 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 a pause, then tap, tap, tap again. In the morning, my freezer had a new sheet of ice across the bin, smooth as lake glass. In the center of that sheet was a long oval, clearer and darker than the rest, and around it a faint seam like a tiny lid. I slammed the door shut. 3 soft knocks answered from inside, perfectly spaced. I tried to laugh it off, but that afternoon a friend texted me a photo from the local lake page. Someone had found a long oval of cloudy ice near the center, like a door outline, and next to it a single boot print that ended mid-step, with no return tracks. The caption joked about aliens. Under the photo, my phone buzzed once, with another voicemail, 003. I didn't press play. but I heard 3 soft taps anyway, as if the sound was already inside the glass. That night, I slept on the couch, facing the front door, waiting for it to open. I found the whispers on a night with no wind, which is how I knew they weren't weather. I was crossing Renfield Lake with my friend Mara after a late bonfire on the shore. Both of us eager to get back to the cars before the cold turned our fingers stupid. The ice was flat and clean black glass under a dusting of snow, and the moon made every old crack line shine like a map. We were halfway across when Mara slowed and said, "Did you hear that I listened and heard only our blades and our breath?" Then it came again, faint and close, Mara. It said her name like someone standing beside her. Mara stopped dead. I spun, scanning, but the lake was empty and the trees were far. Echo. I lied, because naming a thing is how you give it rules. The voice came again, softer, Mara. This time it didn't come from any direction. It rose through the ice itself, through the soles of my skates like a vibration. Tap, 2, tap, tap. 3 knocks followed steady as a code. Mara's eyes went wide, and in the moonlight I saw the exact moment. Curiosity fought fear. She whispered, "Hello," and the lake answered with a breathy murmur that slid across the surface like fingers brushing glass. "Come here." There was still no wind. The air around our faces was dead still, but the whisper moved, anyway, traveling from the center of the lake toward us in a thin line of sound. It wasn't carried. It was placed. Mara took one involuntary glide forward like her body wanted to obey before her brain could object. I grabbed her sleeve. "Don't," I said, and my voice sounded too loud like I'd broken a rule. Under our skates the ice popped once, then twice, then 3 times sharp as knuckles on a door. Pop, pop, pop. The pops landed on the beat of my words, as if the lake was measuring speech. Mara tried to laugh. "It's just people messing with us," she said, but the sentence shook. The whisper returned closer, and this time it used my voice. "It's just people," it repeated perfectly, mimicking my cadence from moments earlier. The imitation was accurate, but empty like a recording played through water. We started moving again, slowly keeping our weight controlled, aiming for the dark smudge of shoreline. For a few seconds it worked. Then a thin line of frost began blooming across the ice, ahead of us, brightening in a straight path, as if something below was exhaling cold along a route. It didn't spread outward, like normal frost. It drew a line, guiding us toward a cloudy oval that formed at the end like a mouth opening. Mara's skate kissed the edge of that oval and stuck for a fraction of a second, the way metal sticks to a freezer. She yelped and lifted her foot, and under the clear ice beside the patch, a pale handprint appeared, palm up, fingers spread, pressing toward her blade as if to hold it. Mara stumbled backward, and the handprint slid smoothly beneath the glass to stay under her shadow. Tap, tap, tap. 3 knocks came from below, directly under her heel. She froze wait, trembling, and I realized the lake was using sound like a leash. "I'm not answering," she whispered. The whisper laughed, a tiny, wet sound that wasn't quite human. Then it spoke again, very softly, in Mara's own voice. "You already did." My phone buzzed in my pocket, even though there was no service. We kept moving, and the whisper changed tactics. It didn't call our names anymore. It started describing us. "Cold hands," it murmured as we skated. "Fast heart," then blue, scarf. And my blood went colder because Mara's scarf was blue and nobody else could see it out here. We were close enough to smell wood smoke from the bonfire we'd left. Relief tightened my throat. That was when the whisper became a command, sharp and intimate. "Stop." Mara obeyed. Her body halted mid-glide muscle memory, snapping to attention like a dog hearing its owner. The instant she stopped the ice, around her skates clouded brighter, and a thin ring of cracks appeared, perfectly circular, centered on her boots. It tightened by a fraction, with each breath she took. I grabbed her arm and tried to pull, but it felt like suction held her soles to the surface. Tap, tap, tap. The knocks came again louder, and the ice under the ring lifted a hair. An upward pressure, like a palm pressing from below to feel her weight. Mara started to sob, and every sob triggered 3 tiny pops after each hitch of breath. "I didn't," she said, shaking her head. The whisper replied from beneath her skates, using my voice again. She did. Under the clear ice, beside her boots, more pale shapes, gathered hands palms up, pressed close, as if watching through a window. They weren't grabbing yet. They were waiting. I dropped to my knees, flattening my body to spread my weight, and I wrapped my arms around Mara's waist, like I could anchor her with my own mass. The ice under me sang a low note, but the ring around her eased a fraction, as if the lake preferred us upright. "Crawl," I said, and we inched forward on our knees, dragging skates behind like dead weight. The suction fought us, then loosened, then fought again, like fingers letting go and re-gripping. Each time Mara's knee slid, a handprint slid beneath it, matching her movement with calm precision. Finally, Mara's skates slid free with a wet squeak, and we crawled faster toward shore, refusing to stand. Behind us, the whisper followed. Not angry, not loud, just patient. "Lay down," it breathed, softened into something almost caring, and that was worse than a frat. At the edge, where ice met snowbank, the pressure vanished, like a switch flipped. We rolled onto land, and lay there, gasping cheeks, burning fingers numb, listening for the next word. The lake went silent. No pups, no whispers, only the normal distant creak of winter. We staggered to the car and slammed the doors. The heater roared, warm air filling our lungs, but neither of us could stop shaking. Mara held her phone up and showed me the screen. A voicemail from a blocked number. Duration 003, received at the exact moment she'd stopped. She hadn't played it. I hadn't either. We sat there, staring at the notification like it was a live wire. When I reached my apartment, I tried to pretend it was over. At 3:00 a.m., I woke to a whisper inside my room right next to my ear, even though the windows were shut. "Stop," it breathed. My body jerked awake. The room was empty. The sound didn't come from the air. It came from my phone on the nightstand, the speaker grill facing up like a tiny black hole. My thumb pressed play before my brain caught up. 3 soft taps. Tap, tap, tap. Then, beneath the taps, a thin murmur that sounded like wind, except the syllables were folded and reversed. I rewound and turned the volume up. For a heartbeat, the murmur snapped into place in my own voice. "Come here." I threw the phone across the bed. It landed face down, and the screen lit anyway, reflecting on the window glass. For a second, the window looked like black ice, and a faint oval of frost bloomed on the glass from the outside, even though the room was warm. Inside that oval, 3 fingertip marks appeared, evenly spaced, like taps that didn't need sound. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't open the window. I didn't answer. I sat there, listening to the silence. And in the silence, I could still hear the lake arranging sound into instructions, practicing my voice, waiting for me to stop. Not yet. I found out my dog understood the ice better than I did the night he refused to take a single step, even though he'd followed me everywhere else without question. Ranger is a 70-pound mutt, with the confidence of an animal that thinks the world is his yard, and normally winter only makes him happier. He loves snow, loves the crunch, loves the way our breath turns to clouds. He tries to bite. That evening I drove him to Harper Lake, because the shoreline trail was packed down, and the surface was a smooth black plate, dusted with a thin veil of powder. The kind of night where everything looks harmless in moonlight. I clipped his leash on out of habit, not because he runs, and we walked from the empty lot toward the water. He trotted ahead until the snow thinned and the ice began. Then he stopped. So abruptly, the leash went tight, his paws spread, nails scraping, weight shifting back like he'd hit an invisible wall. His ears pinned, his tail lowered. He stared at the ice, not at reflections, not at the distant shore, but at one specific patch near the edge where the snow was lighter and the glass was clearer. "Come on," I said, giving the leash a gentle tug. Ranger didn't budge. He let out a low whine and leaned away from the lake, as if the air above it smelled wrong. I tried treats. I tried the cheerful voice I use when I want him to jump into the car. Nothing. His paws would not cross the line where snow became glass. Then under the quiet I felt it before I heard it, a faint vibration traveling up through the ice into the soles of my boots like a distant drum. Tap, tap, tap. 3 dull knocks, evenly spaced, coming from below the surface. Ranger's head snapped toward the clear patch. His lips peeled back without a growl, at first just tension. Then he barked once, sharp and panicked, like warning, not aggression. I laughed reflexively because laughter is what you do when your brain wants to stay in control, and I told myself it was the ice settling. But ice doesn't knock. Ranger backed up hard enough to drag my arm, and I nearly stumbled. He planted again and stared at me as if I were the one being unreasonable. I took one cautious step forward onto the ice, just my left boot keeping my right on snow. The surface held solid, no groan, and that false confidence made me lean in. The moment my weight transferred, the tapping answered immediately from directly beneath my boot. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was closer, more personal, and the ice under my sole felt subtly alive, like a thin membrane pushed from below. Ranger yelped and lunged backward. I tightened my grip on the leash and dropped to a knee at the edge, peering into the clear patch he'd been watching. At first I saw only trapped air bubbles and a wavering reflection of the moon. Then my eyes adjusted, and I saw the outline of a hand beneath the glass. Palm-up fingers spread, pressed, so close the ridges of the print clouded the ice. The hand moved an inch, sliding smoothly under the surface, as if it were gliding along the underside of a window. It stopped beneath my boot. Not random. Centered. Measuring. A second hand appeared beside it, smaller, and for a heartbeat, I had the insane thought of a child under there. Then I saw the fingers were too long, the joints bending wrong, and the nails looked like small hooks. Ranger barked again, deep now, and tried to run. The leash jerked my shoulder, and I stayed down because I couldn't look away. In the dark water beyond the clear patch, something pale drifted closer, rising with slow patience. A forehead, brows, open eyes, a face angled upward, watching me through the glass, with the calm focus of a predator behind an aquarium wall. Its mouth opened slightly, and a cluster of tiny bubbles escaped and clung to the underside of the ice, like beads. The face didn't look drowned. It looked awake. The tapping came again louder, and this time it traveled moving around my boot in a clockwise circle, as if knuckles were walking the rim of my footprint. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tub, tap, a pause. Then 3 again like a code, being repeated, for someone slow to learn. A thin white fracture snapped outward from the clear patch, not spidering randomly but drawing a curved line that arced toward my knee and stopped as if it knew exactly where my body touched the surface. Ranger didn't wait. He threw his weight backward and dragged me off balance. My knee slid on the ice, and the moment my weight shifted away from the clear patch, the hands under the glass slid too, following keeping position beneath me, like the lake was tracking my center of gravity. Panic finally overrode curiosity. I scrambled to my feet and let Ranger pull me back onto snow. The instant both my boots hit land, the tapping stopped, as if an invisible boundary had been reached. Ranger kept pulling until we were 10 yards from the edge. Then he turned and faced the lake, hackles up chest, heaving, issuing a low growl. I'd never heard from him. I shined my phone light back at the ice. The clear patch was already clouding over frosting from beneath, in a perfect oval like an eyelid closing. In the last second before it turned opaque, I saw the face tilt slightly like it was listening, and the hands pressed once more against the glass fingertips, aligned in a neat row. My phone buzzed even though I had no service out there. A voicemail notification appeared from a blocked number. Duration 003. I didn't play it. I didn't need to. Ranger began whining, again urgent, and I took the hint my own instincts had missed. We ran to the car. Ranger jumped in without being asked, and curled low on the floorboard, like he wanted to disappear. I started the engine, cranked heat, and only then did my hands begin to shake. On the drive home, every time the tires hit a seam in the road, Ranger flinched like it was a knock from below. When we got inside, he refused to go near the back door that faces the lake trail. He planted in the hallway the way he had on the shoreline and stared at the floor. At 3:00 a.m., I woke to him growling softly. He was standing over my phone on the nightstand, ears back, eyes fixed on the screen as if it were a hole in the ice. The screen lit up by itself with the voicemail. Ling Ling San. Against every better instinct, I hit play because I wanted proof it wasn't in my head. Tap, tap, tap. 3 clean knocks, and under them a faint wet scrape, like a palm sliding across glass. Ranger snapped his head toward the bedroom window, and barked once. The window pane had fogged in a small oval from the outside, despite the warm room, and in that oval, a pale print appeared. 5 fingers splayed, pressed slowly, as if testing thickness. Ranger lunged at the glass, and the print withdrew, leaving nothing but cold. In the morning, Ranger refused his breakfast, until I carried the bowl into the living room away from every window. When I opened the freezer for ice, a thin sheet had formed across the bin, smooth and clear as lake glass, and trapped inside it was a single dog paw print on the underside, pressed upward, as if something had been watching Ranger, the way Ranger had watched it. I shut the freezer hard, and heard from inside the door 3 soft taps that answered like a promise. That afternoon I took Ranger to the vet for his shaken paw pads, and he trembled the whole time, staring at the tile like it was ice. When we got home, he pressed his nose to my palm, then looked away, refusing to meet my eyes. Not once. Ever. I found out wolves can use a frozen lake like a highway the night they stalked us across. Open ice, silent and patient, as if the surface belonged to them. It was Bear Glass Lake, a long oval ringed by spruce, and my friend Dean insisted the shortcut across would save us 40 minutes of hiking back to the trailhead. We'd been checking trail cameras for a local biologist, and dusk had fallen faster than expected. The forest path was drifted over, but the lake was swept clean by wind, a dark plate under a thin dusting of snow. Dean said wolves won't come out on ice like that, was a rule, and I wanted to argue, but the cold had already turned my fingers clumsy, and the idea of a straight line to the truck felt like mercy. We stepped onto the lake headlamps on low, and the ice answered with a soft singing creak that made the hair on my arms rise. Halfway out, Dean stopped and pointed at a set of tracks. At first I thought they were dog prints from someone's pet, but the stride was too long and the pads were too clean. 4 toes, heavy pressure, no nail marks moving in a straight purposeful line from the tree line onto the open lake. Then a second line, then a third, fanning out like a net, I said. We should turn back, and Dean laughed once, brittle, and kept walking. They won't cross, he repeated, but his voice had lost confidence. The tracks didn't continue far. They ended abruptly on clear ice, as if the animals had stepped off the world. No scuffs, no drift marks, just a sudden stop. That was when the first knock came from below. Tap, tap. 3 dull taps, traveling up through the ice, into my boot soles. Perfectly spaced, too deliberate to be settling. Dean froze. "Did you do that?" he whispered like I had a remote. I shook my head, and the tapping repeated closer, directly beneath us. Tap, tap, tap. We started moving again faster, and the lake popped in little sharp sounds that kept time with our steps, not breaking, just answering, like it was counting us. On the left, near a dark patch of wind-scoured glass, something moved at the edge of my headlamp beam. A shape detached from the tree line, and stepped onto the ice. Then another. Then another. Grey bodies, low and smooth, moving with the effortless balance of predators that don't need traction. Wolves. 4 of them at first, then more behind, shadows slipping out of the forest. They didn't rush. They spread, matching the pattern of the tracks we'd seen, taking positions the way hunters take lanes. Dean raised his arms and shouted, trying to look big. The sound carried across the flat surface like a thrown stone, and the wolves didn't flinch. They just watched, eyes reflecting faintly in our beams. The strangest part was the silence. Their paws should have made a soft skitter on the snow-dusted ice, but I heard nothing from them, only the quiet pop of cracks beneath our boots and the rasp of our breathing. A low howl rose, not from above, but from the ice itself, a vibration that traveled up like sound through a pipe. Dean's eyes widened. "That's not right," he said, and for once we agreed without arguing. We turned toward the nearest shore, choosing the shortest line to trees, and the wolves shifted with us, gliding to keep the same distance, always behind, always to the sides, never closing as if they were waiting for something else to do the work. Tap, tap, tap. The knocks came again from below, and this time I felt a gentle upward pressure under my left foot, like a palm testing the ice through my weight. I glanced down through a clear patch and saw a pale hand sliding under my boot, fingers spread, matching my pace as if it knew my weight and my next step. Like a mirror, I shoved Dean's shoulder and yelled, "Run!" and we did the stupid thing running on ice because terror makes you trade one risk for another. Our boots slapped and skidded. Behind us, the wolves finally moved faster, not sprinting but lengthening their strides, drifting closer like shadows in water. As we ran, the lake began to crack around us, in a widening ring, pops landing in free-beat bursts. Pop, 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 a pause. Pop, pop, pop. It felt like a drumline, guiding the chase. Dean slipped to a knee. A cloudy oval bloomed, and a handprint appeared under it, cradling the impact. He lurched up, and the print slid after him. The wolves closed another 10 feet. I could see their breath now, but it didn't rise like warm fog. It hung low, heavy, like vapor from deep water. Their eyes weren't yellow in the beam. They were faintly green. One wolf opened its mouth, and I expected a snarl. Instead, I heard a quiet clicking 3 beats, like teeth tapping on glass. Click, 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 the same rhythm as the knocks. We reached the middle of the lake, the worst place to be, and the wind died, completely leaving the surface so still it felt staged. Ahead on the line to shore, a dark circle sat in the snow, an open hole we hadn't drilled, perfectly round, steaming in the cold like a mouth, exhaling. Dean veered away from it instinctively. I tried to follow, but my boot caught on. Nothing, a sudden stickiness like the ice had grown suction. Under the surface, the pale hand pressed harder, whitening the glass around my sole. Tap, tap, tap. The knocks came directly under my foot, and the wolves surged as if the signal had been given. Dean grabbed my jacket and yanked, and the suction released with a wet squeak that made my skin crawl. We staggered past the open hole without looking into it, but I felt cold air rising from it like breath. In my peripheral vision, I saw something pale rise, just beneath the hole's rim, not breaking the surface, just pressing close enough to darken the water like an eye turning upward. The wolves were almost on us now, and still they made no sound with their paws. Their silence felt unnatural, like they weren't truly on top of the ice. Dean fumbled a flare from his pack and struck it. Red light exploded harsh and alive. The wolves hesitated not from fear, but from confusion, like the rule had changed. In the flare's glow, I saw pale hands pressed up beneath the nearest wolf's paws, moving with it like strings. The wolf was a mask, and the lake was holding it. The flare sputtered. The wolves resumed faster now, and the knocks under our boots became frantic, a rapid 3-beat code repeating like laughter. We hit the snowbank at the edge, lungs burning, and the moment our boots touched land, the wolves stopped dead on the ice, as if they'd hit an invisible fence. On the ice, the wolves stopped at an invisible line watching. One stepped and the ice whitened with a handprint from below. Tap. Tap. Dap. Then they backed away. We didn't wait. We ran through trees to the truck, slammed doors, and sat shaking with heat blasting our faces. Dean kept whispering. They weren't wolves, like repeating. It could make it less true. My phone lit with a blocked voicemail. 003. I played it tap, 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 then faint circling steps, and a wet pant like deep water breathing. At home, fresh wolf prints stopped at my porch, with no return trail, and 3 dents appeared in the frost like silent knocks. I found the dump site because the ice was too clean where it should have been messy. It was midweek grey daylight, and I was walking the edge of Fulton Lake, looking for a place to set a trail camera after all the stories. because part of me still wanted proof that the lake was more than my panic. The shoreline snow was scuffed with normal life. Dog tracks, sled grooves, boot prints from kids who dared each other out and back. But 50 yards from shore there was a polished lane, like someone had swept it. Ranger stopped at the shoreline and refused to follow. He planted his paws, nails, skittering, and leaned back so hard the leash went tight. He stared at that polished lane the way he'd stared at the clear patch on Harper Lake, ears pinned tail low like the air above it. Smelled wrong. I clipped his leash to a stump and stepped out alone, keeping my weight light. The ice held with that dull, confident thunk that usually calms you, but my stomach didn't listen. Up close, the reason the surface looked wrong became obvious. There were cuts, not auger holes, straight lines. 3 long rectangles, each about the size of a person, clean-edged as if someone had traced them with a saw. The snow had been brushed away from the seams, and along one seam I saw frozen tape residue and a faint smear that looked like a drag mark ending abruptly at the lid. I knelt and put my palm flat on the ice. It felt colder than the air, like it was pulling heat out of my skin. Under the glass, there was a faint ticking like beads, clicking far away. Then directly under my hand, 3 dull knocks traveled up through the ice into my wrist. Tap, tap, tap. The taps weren't cracks. They were deliberate, evenly spaced, the way you knock on a door when you expect an answer. Ranger barked once from shore, sharp and panicked, and the ticking stopped. I should have left. Instead, I pulled out my underwater camera because curiosity is a sickness, and because if this was a crime scene, I wanted evidence before the lake erased it. Nearby, a small round hole had been skimmed clean, and maintained a perfect 8-inch circle with no shavings around it like someone had planned to come back. I lowered the camera puck into black water. 10 feet down, the beam caught something pale. At first I thought it was a rock. Then it resolved into a human sleeve, and a bare hand, fingers slightly curled as if frozen mid-grab. I swallowed and lowered the camera another few feet. The lake opened into a darker pocket beneath the rectangles, and the light revealed what my brain had been trying to avoid: bodies. Not one. Many. They were upright in the water, arranged in a loose circle, as if standing in a room and facing the same direction up. Coats zipped, hoods up, arms hanging. They weren't drifting. They were held steady, suspended close enough to the ice that you could see frost crystals clinging to eyelashes. Above their heads I saw thin dark lines, tethers running up to the underside of the ice, like roots pressed against glass. The lines converged toward the rectangles, toward those lids, as if each lid was an anchor point. A person could dump a body in a hole, yes, but this wasn't dumping. This was storing, displaying. The camera cord twitched gently like fingers testing it. One face tilted a fraction, not bobbing with water, but rotating in place. Control. Its lips parted and a cluster of bubbles slipped out, then stuck to the ice ceiling above like beads. 3 bubbles in a neat row. Tap, tap, tap. The knocks hit my soles again, and the water around my camera swirled, once slow and deliberate, like something massive rolling beneath the surface, to get a better angle on me. I yanked the camera up hard. The screen flashed bright as it neared the underside of the ice, and in that flash I saw a pale hand pressed against the ice from below. Fingers splayed directly under my boot. The hand slid with me as I stumbled backward, keeping itself aligned like it was measuring my weight through the glass. I hit shoreline snow, and the hand withdrew into darkness, as if it had reached a boundary it couldn't cross. Ranger dragged me to the truck before I realized I was moving. My fingers shook so badly, I fumbled my phone twice before calling the sheriff's non-emergency line. I forced my voice into calm, boring words. Possible bodies under the ice, I said. Maybe dumped. Maybe more than one. The deputy who showed up an hour later wore the expression of someone expecting a prank. He walked out with a flashlight, and an auger drilled near the polished lane and shined his beam into black water. He saw only clear water and the pale sheen of ice, nothing upright, nothing human. Back at the truck he watched my footage anyway. His face changed at the circle of suspended figures. He didn't call it fake. He didn't laugh. He just watched jaw tight. and when the 3 bubble beads formed, he flinched like he'd heard a familiar sound. "You didn't see this," he said finally. "You don't go back out there." I asked if he was going to call divers. He stared at the lake and said, "This isn't a diver job." Then he handed my phone back like it was contaminated and drove away without taking my name. That night, my doorbell camera sent an alert at 2:59 a.m. I opened the clip, expecting a stray cat. Instead, I saw a figure standing on my porch in a hooded parka face, hidden posture perfectly still. Snow fell lightly, but none collected on the figure's shoulders. It raised one gloved hand and knocked on my door, 3 times slow and evenly spaced. Tap, tap, tap. Then it turned and walked off the porch toward the streetlight and left no footprints in fresh snow. My phone buzzed with a new file received without a sender. It was a 10-second video shot from below the ice, looking up through clear black glass at Fulton Lake. A bundled shape, long and heavy, was dragged across the surface toward one rectangle lid. The lid flexed and opened like an eyelid. A pale hand rose from black water and accepted the bundle with calm care. The lid closed again, sealing perfectly. 3 bubbles rose and stuck to the underside like punctuation. Then the camera tilted up and caught the underside of the lid itself. A row of prints pressed outward from beneath, as if hands were bracing the door shut. The view fogged for a moment, like breath, should have been close enough to fog the glass from below, and the video cut. I didn't sleep. I kept checking my freezer, because cold had started to feel like a doorway. At dawn, I opened the ice bin and found a single clear disc sitting on top of the cubes, like someone had placed it there. Trapped inside the disc was a small metal key on a ring tag, stamped with a number. I recognized the number immediately, because the deputy had a matching tag on his clipboard when he watched my footage and tried to keep it turned away from me. My hands went numb. I dropped the disc in the sink and listened. My phone buzzed with a blocked voicemail. Duration 003. I didn't press play, but 3 dull taps traveled up through the porcelain into my fingertips anyway. Tap, tap, tap. Ranger growled from the hallway, staring at the dark circle of the drain like it was a fishing hole. Inside the clear ice, the key turned by itself a fraction, like something on the other side had tested a lock. Then it stopped patient, as if waiting for me to admit I understood what the rectangles on the lake were for. I learned Lake Superior is not a lake the way other lakes are. It's an inland ocean, wearing a winter mask. Mason said that while our snowmobile dragged the sleds onto the hard white plain and the shoreline lights shrank behind us until they looked like a few weak stars. A mile out, he promised, and we'll feel like we're on another planet. He was right. The horizon was a straight black line. The wind was a constant low hiss, and the ice under our boots didn't feel like ground so much as a skin stretched over something that wanted to move. There were 4 of us, Mason, Aaron, Travis, and me. We pitched one tent, and a short windbreak drilled 3 fishing holes in a line, and set the flasher on a bucket like a little altar. Aaron hated deep water, even in summer, but she'd come anyway because she trusted Mason, and because she didn't want fear to win. Travis kept checking thickness with a spud bar, tapping and listening. I noticed he always tapped in 3s. Tap, tap, tap. The ice answered with tiny clicks that sounded too much like reply. At dusk, the temperature dropped hard. The holes steamed and refroze at the rims. We caught nothing. The flasher showed the bottom far down a faint line that might as well have been outer space. Then, around 10:40 p.m., a thick mark appeared on the screen, something rising from deep water. It wasn't the clean arc of a fish. It was a slow, wide shadow that climbed until it hovered directly under Mason's hole and stopped. Mason tried to laugh. "Big trout," he said, but his voice didn't sound convinced. 3 soft knocks came from below the ice, not from Travis's bar, not from our boots. Tap, tap, tap. The sound traveled through the surface and into our ankles. Aaron whispered, "Did you hear that?" And before anyone could answer, the knocks repeated closer, as if they were under the hole itself. Tap, tap, tup. The shadow on the flasher nudged upward a fraction. The whole water dimmed like something had slid between us and whatever light lived down there. Mason bent to look. I grabbed his jacket and yanked him back hard enough to make him stumble. The ice around the hole popped in 3 sharp beats, and a white ring of stress formed perfectly circular as if drawn by a compass. Pop, pop, pop. The ring expanded an inch. Pop, pop, pop. The lake was knocking with cracks instead of sound. A faint green glow appeared beneath the ice beyond our camp. Not a reflection, not an LED, something deep that pulsed slowly, once, twice, 3 times. It moved under the glass the way a flashlight moves behind a wall, except there was no beam, only glow. Travis swung his headlamp toward it, and the glow brightened like it enjoyed being noticed. Erin backed toward the tent, hands up as if she could keep distance from something under her feet. From inside the nearest hole came a wet tapping close and intimate like knuckles on the underside of a bowl. Tap, tap, tap. The water quivered. Travis whispered, "Don't answer it," and I understood he meant more than words. He meant the instinct to knock back. He meant the childish urge to prove you're not scared. Then footsteps started. Slow, steady steps circling the tent. Crunch, pause, crunch. There were no other campers for miles, and the steps made no sense on open ice. Mason unzipped the tent flap and aimed his headlamp out. The beam swept empty surface, then landed on fresh prints, pressed into thin frost. 3-toed impressions wet at the center, leading from nowhere to the edge of our hole line. The prints didn't go toward shore. They went from hole to hole like someone walking a hallway of doors. Travis said we should leave immediately. Mason argued about the snowmobile and the gear. The lake ended the argument. The ice beneath the snowmobile popped 3 times, and the machine sank a fraction as if the surface had softened under its weight. Mason revved it. The engine screamed. The sled didn't move. Beneath the clear ice under the track, a pale handprint bloomed, palm up. Fingers spread, as if the lake had pinned the machine with its own hand. The green glow surged closer, sliding under the glass toward us. The flasher screen, filled with one smooth band, so close it erased the depth line entirely. Erin started crying, without sound. The knocks returned from multiple directions, a ring of rhythm traveling under the camp. Tap, 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 tap. A pause, then 3 again, perfectly spaced, like a code being repeated for someone slow to learn. We grabbed what we could and started toward shore. But we didn't run upright. We crawled and slid, spreading weight the way every safety guide tells you. Behind us, the holes began to open and close, in sequence the rims whitening, then darkening like blinking eyes. A crack line formed ahead of us, in 3-beat pops, drawing a gentle curve that steered us away from the shortest route. Pop, pop, pop. Another line formed to the left, penning us into a narrow lane. Erin slipped and screamed. The moment her knee hit the ice, a pale handprint appeared beneath it from below, catching her impact like a palm against glass. She tried to stand and her boot stuck with suction. Under the clear ice, a long pale hand slid into place beneath her sole and pressed upward. Erin gasped. "Something has me," and her voice sounded small. Mason grabbed her arms and pulled. She moved an inch, then stopped like an anchor at caught. The green glow appeared ahead of us, cutting us off like a headlight in fog. The glow pulsed 3 times, and the ice in front of us clouded into a long oval the size of a body, as if a lid was forming. Under that oval, something pale, pressed close fingertips, then a palm-testing thickness. Travis raised his spud bar and slammed it down. The bar bounced, as if the ice had turned rubbery, and 3 dull knocks answered directly under the impact. Tap, tap, tap. In the sudden quiet, I heard a faint glide under the glass, smooth and patient, circling beneath us. Wherever it passed, the ice felt subtly warmer under my palms, as if the lake was bringing its mouth closer to the surface. Erin started praying. Mason started bargaining out loud with nothing. Travis kept repeating, "Don't answer it," like the words were a rope. We made it to shore by refusing to stand. We crawled until the ice turned rough, and the snow under our hands changed texture. The instant our bodies crossed onto packed drift, the tapping stopped, as if a switch had been thrown. The green glow paused at the edge, then drifted back under the lake, slow and satisfied. We didn't go back for the tent. We didn't go back for the snowmobile. We ran to the truck and drove with the heater, blasting, and our gear half missing. In daylight, we returned with a ranger and 2 more people, embarrassed and angry and desperate to prove it wasn't hysteria. The ice was perfect. No holes, no lids, no prints. Not even our tracks from the night before, as if Superior had smoothed its own skin. The only thing left was Travis's spud bar, standing upright in the snow like someone had planted it. The handle had 3 wet fingerprints on it, spaced like a hand that didn't quite fit human proportions. 2 nights later, my phone lit at 3:00 a.m. with a blocked voicemail, 003. I didn't press play. I didn't have to. From the dark kitchen, the freezer door clicked once, and 3 soft taps traveled through the metal into the room, the same patient rhythm we'd heard on Superior. Tap, 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 and in the silence after, I still felt it listening to me.